Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios today on a Reaction Monday. Titans Monday's over, but boy, we got Titans drama to get into. Ian is here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
I got to say, off the top, number one, we all survived Snowpocalypse, which... Again, I'm not going to be Mr. Doomsday, but I think there were a lot of people out there who didn't think they would be able to survive Snowpocalypse. That's number one. Number two, Stillman and Company is now presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. That's right. So shout out to Southern Bank of Tennessee. Stillman and Company presented by Southern Bank of Tennessee. Brand new sponsor. We love to have them aboard. Number three, we've got three major stories that I think we have to get into, and we will today over the course of the show. One thing I hate doing is I understand radio probably better than anybody else in town, and I understand that the person listening at 2 o'clock is not necessarily the person listening at 3:15. So when a radio host at 3:15 says, well, we talked about that in the 2 o'clock hour, I find that to be arrogant on the part of the host. The host's job is to give the people what they want when they want it. But there's a lot to get to today. So we have three separate yet equally important stories. Number one, we'll be following the Titans general manager search. They've interviewed 10 people. And we're going to see if this is actually going to be a GM search or if this is going to be the Brinker Buddy Brigade. I have been told that it is a real GM search, but that doesn't mean that I believe what I've been told. Number two, Ran Carthon did an interview this morning. Ian, did you listen to the interview with Ran Carthon? An hour of my life.
I have not heard the whole thing, no.
How much of it did you hear?
Just like the first 4 or 5 minutes.
Probably no need to go on any further after that. Ran Carthon did an interview. It was an hour long. And they didn't ask one question about Chad Brinker. His name didn't even come up. But we will get to the Ran Carthon interview, which I thought was a horrible look. I thought it was a horrible look for the city. The Carthon interview. We'll get into that. But I'm starting on this today. Who says you can't go home? Because Mike Vrabel is a New England Patriot again. Now, how did we get here? We all know the story. There was a triangle of dysfunction between Amy, Vrabel, and John Robinson. Again, the Titans got a whiff of success. An AFC Championship game appearance, which is not nothing, but it is also not the Super Bowl. They got a whiff of success. And the three of them could not see eye to eye, and it all deteriorated. Again, was it John Robinson? Was it Vrabel? Was it Amy? Was it a... And in New England, they had a similar issue. Granted, this was not about dysfunction. This was a triangle of triumph. But again, egos got in the way between Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, and Robert Kraft. And now both teams are at the bottom of the NFL. And here's the juicy part of Vrabel to New England. When somebody gets hired, when somebody gets signed, when somebody gets traded for, I don't celebrate that day because we'll see. I analyze, but again, that's not the day to celebrate. During the free agency period last March, when the Titans were signing Calvin Ridley or trading for L'Jarius Sneed, I mean, I have people, what do you think of Ran Carthon now, Jared? And I was like, I'll mail an off-season championship trophy to somebody's house if I need to. But let's wait, see if L'Jarius Sneed's knee actually holds up. And that's where I am today. Because a lot of people are championing the New England Patriots right now. The truth is, if it's not for Joe Milton, of all people, the New England Patriots are just as bad as the Tennessee Titans. The very bottom of the league. The two teams played each other in November. It went to overtime. You both equally suck. Now, they have a young quarterback in Drake May, but just because you have a young quarterback doesn't mean that he's for sure your guy. And it's not like Drake May was doing what Jaden Daniels did last night. But this is the juicy part with Vrabel and the Titans. We're going to figure out, we're going to find out who was right and who was wrong. Amy Adams Strunk made the decision on Mike Vrabel, and she cannot run from Mike Vrabel's future. If he wins, this fan base will never forgive her. It's crazy to me because if he loses, everybody will forget all about Mike Vrabel. They'll never look at it and say, oh, the worst decision in the world. But if Vrabel turns the Patriots around, that's exactly what's going to happen around here. And she may never, ever live that down. Her father fired a popular coach, Bum Phillips, in Houston and never lived it down. Even though Bum Phillips did go to New Orleans and didn't do anything. Now, the world thinks Mike Vrabel is the greatest coach who ever lived. They say, well, it wasn't his fault that they traded A.J. Brown. It wasn't his fault that they busted on Isaiah Wilson and Caleb Farley. And it wasn't his fault that they hired Rand Carthon. And I think there was some truth to that. And now he gets to go to this great organization. They have a young quarterback in Drake May. Elliott Wolf, their head personnel guy, doesn't even have the GM title. He's probably answering to Mike Vrabel. The truth is, there should be no excuses for the great Mike Vrabel if he's as good as everybody says. I used to think about 3 years ago, Vrabel was the best coach in the NFL. Put him up there with Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan, and I just kept Sean McVay. And I was so impressed with how Vrabel finds a way to win these games. We call him the Vrabel special, that you would never expect a team to win. And the fact that Vrabel can motivate these guys and he could use 90 players and get the number 1 seed. But that was before Todd Downing and Tim Kelly. That was before the offensive line fell apart and his offensive line coaches, who weren't worth a damn, couldn't fix it. So now it's time for Vrabel to show that he can hire a coaching staff that isn't a bunch of retreads and buddies from his Texan days. Can Mike Vrabel this time actually? Mike Vrabel's a good coach. But I also didn't have a problem with them getting rid of Mike Vrabel. Now, I did have a problem with Rand Carthon being promoted at the same time, which I was very vocal about, and I was told I was going to be proven wrong 8 ways to Sunday by, but I didn't have a problem moving on from Vrabel. But here's the great thing about sports. We have a scorecard. And if the great Mike Vrabel is so good, then we will see him resurrect what is a dead franchise in the New England Patriots. Other than Robert Kraft in the box and the uniforms they wear on the field, there is nothing about this New England Patriots team right now that is anything reminiscent of the Belichick and Brady Patriots dynasty. The team where when you played them, you knew if you make one mistake, you are in trouble. So now it's time for Mike Vrabel to bring it back. I'm not sure he will. But if he does, I'm not sure Amy Adams Strunk will ever be able to win the fans back. She fired Mike Mularkey, and nobody cared. She fired John Robinson, and I actually think people were happy that she fired John Robinson, as incompetent as all of that was. But she fired Mike Vrabel, and that was the controversial decision with the fans. Mike Mularkey was on his 3rd coaching job. He was never going to get a 4th. John Robinson, he's interviewed for the Jets job. I think he probably deserves another opportunity as a general manager in the NFL. I think he is a good general manager, but he may never get another opportunity again. But we all knew with Vrabel, who was the most popular coach the Titans have ever had, we all knew with Vrabel, he was getting another job. And I'm actually glad that Vrabel's taking a job that's basically in the exact same position the Titans are, the bottom of the league, because now we're going to see who was right and who was wrong. She fired Vrabel. She made that choice. And that will either validate what people think of both her right now or invalidate what people think of him. She, I believe, made the move on Mike Vrabel because she decided that even though Rand Carthon was never that special, she decided that Mike's really not that good. Mike's good. Mike's really not that good. And I can't tell you for sure which one it'll be. I can't tell you for sure if Amy's going to be proven right or if the entire, Mike Vrabel, how dare you fire Mike Vrabel crew is going to get the last laugh. But I can tell you this, for her sake and her standing in this city, which right now has never been lower, she better hope Mike Vrabel doesn't turn the Patriots around. Because while I can't tell you what's going to happen as far as Vrabel winning, losing, Lombardi trophies, first-round draft choices, I can't tell you this. He was so popular here that if he has success there, they'll never forgive her. They won't accept blaming Robinson. They won't accept blaming Rand. They won't accept blaming Vrabel. They will never forgive her. This is her Bum Phillips. Now we'll see how he does. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025 if you want to get in on that. So, I can't tell you how Mike Vrabel's going to do. And you don't know that either. Nobody knows. But I do have a prediction of what we're going to see in the Mike Vrabel tenure as the New England Patriots coach, which will be watched very closely here. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, presented by Southern Bank of Tennessee, right here, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, buddy.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Just a thought on everything that you've said, kind of wrapped in your career as a player here. You said this is a special place. As a coach now, how would you describe what kind of players you want to wear a Patriot uniform to help you win as an organization?
Elliot's going to laugh. I'm going to say good ones. That's just an inside joke between him and I already just over the weekend and through the interview process. But, we're going to ask our players to just do a few things. One is to put the team first, to know what to do, and play fast and aggressive. So that's the vision for the type of player. Winners come in all shapes and sizes. Right? We're going to have leaders. Leaders are going to identify themselves. I know that our staff and our ability to create winners and competitors are probably easier than it is to create leaders. And the leaders are going to identify themselves. The leaders are going to ones that define the culture. The culture will be what drives and gives you the results that we're all, after. So the type of player, when you get into scouting and evaluation, every team has a height, weight, speed, right? And then it's our job to, take analytical data and watch the tape and just figure out where they fit best for us. And maybe they're the best ones and the right ones. That would be wonderful. But it's a long process, and those are the things that we're going to ask the players to do, is put the team first, know what to do, and play fast and aggressive and play with some speed.
That was Mike Vrabel in his opening press conference. And I will say this, I did listen to the entire Mike Vrabel New England press conference today. It wasn't as boring as the Rand Carthon interview, but it was close. And what was crazy about the Vrabel press conference was there weren't any real pot shots towards the Titans. At one point, he did thank Cleveland. He did not ever thank the Titans or really mention the Titans. But it was really just the same things he said when he got hired here in 2018. Said the same thing about culture not being about when you win, but it's about when you lose. And the fact about it's all going to be about the players, and everybody every day is going to wake up to help the players, and so on and so forth. But I have a prediction to make about Mike Vrabel. I've said if Mike Vrabel has success, Amy Adams-Strunk will wear this with this fan base maybe forever. Somebody in the YouTube chat said, hey, Titan fans will pretend they don't care about Mike Vrabel, but it will pain them to see Vrabel coaching the Patriots. And I think there's some truth to that, especially when you're as down as the Titans are right now. But I have a prediction to make. Mike Vrabel is not going to win with the Patriots. Ian, is it wrong to put a calling it 4 years in advance?
4 years. That's pretty open-ended. We got a while on that one, huh?
I know. And who knows where I'll be in 4 years, but
I'll put it down.
I'm going to say it to you like this. On January 13th of 2029, Mike Vrabel will not be the head coach of the New England Patriots. And I'm going to tell you why. I think Mike Vrabel is a good coach, but I don't think he should have taken this job. I think the reason Vrabel took the job is because Vrabel used to play for the Patriots. And I think the reason the Patriots wanted Vrabel is because Vrabel used to play for the Patriots. Not just because Vrabel is a good coach. But he took it because he loves Robert Kraft and because Vrabel is so cocky that he probably thinks he could turn Vanderbilt into what Nick Saban made Alabama. But Vrabel's not that good. Right now, the New England Patriots are almost a carbon copy of the Tennessee Titans with higher income tax and a division that faces Josh Allen twice a year. That team, outside of a young quarterback, has almost nothing on its roster. They've got a young corner who Vrabel should have drafted as part of the collaboration in 2023. Instead, they took a guard. But they have a young corner and a young quarterback. No offensive line, no receivers, no big-time sacker on defense. They're right where you are. Ian, who is the best player right now on the New England Patriots?
The best player on the Patriots. Maybe the corner.
Christian Gonzalez?
Maybe. The quarterback is good. It's promising, but he's still so young.
I mean, I wouldn't say Drake May is good by NFL standards right now.
So, I don't know. Their wide receivers aren't that great. They don't really have a good pass rusher or offensive line. I don't know. I guess Christian Gonzalez.
I would say maybe Kenneth Duggar, the safety, might be their best player. Maybe. Vrabel's a good coach. He's a good motivator. He's a smart guy. Sometimes he's too smart for his own good. But he's not a personnel guy. And he is certainly not an offensive coach. And I think this has to be said because for whatever reason, I feel like this constantly gets forgotten. But if you look at the team Vrabel is inheriting today, where we don't even know who the best player on the team is, I don't even know how many good players are on that New England Patriots team. He inherited a team that had Kevin Byard, who had led the NFL in interceptions the year before he got there. Jack Conklin had already been named an All-Pro. Taylor Lewan as a starting left tackle in his prime. Jarrell Casey, Delaney Walker, Derrick Henry. And this was a team that had gone on the road and won a playoff game. The situation Vrabel's inheriting now in Foxborough is not that. And I do think Vrabel set a good culture or built a good culture or fostered a good culture, whatever you want to call it, when he was the coach of the Titans. But it wasn't like Vrabel taught those guys how to win. That was Mike Mularkey and his group of old pawpaws. But they weren't as popular as Vrabel. You didn't want to have beers with them like you did Vrabel. They didn't win Super Bowls as players like Vrabel. They weren't friends with Tom Brady like Vrabel. But we completely miss what Vrabel inherited. Again, the Titans won with Vrabel as the coach. But if you talk to, I think it was Terry Robisky, said in a story Joe did last year in The Athletic, Terry Robisky said they thought they were going to win the Super Bowl if they had come back in 2018. Again, I don't think they would have won the Super Bowl, but they thought that. And the situation Vrabel's inheriting in New England is not that. So I think Vrabel would have fit much better in a spot like Dallas, which we didn't know was coming open. And I don't know if Jerry would write the check for Vrabel because Jerry's a cheap ass. But I thought he would have been a much better fit in a place like Dallas, where they have their quarterback in place. In Dallas, all Vrabel has to do is hire an offensive coordinator, which is easier said than done. And again, part of the reason why I think Vrabel is going to fail in New England is because I don't think Vrabel will hire a very good coaching staff. But he's already got Dak Prescott. He's already got CeeDee Lamb. He's already got pieces in place on offense. Now, they'll still have to draft some more, and they'll still have to, but the quarterback, that's fine. The job I thought Vrabel should have taken was Jacksonville. Because Jacksonville has a quarterback. Jacksonville has a number one wide receiver in Brian Thomas. Jacksonville would have been the spot. Bad division. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Vrabel actually is the greatest coach in the history of football. And Amy's wrong. And Rand was wrong. And I was wrong. And everybody else who doesn't think that Vrabel's the greatest coach who ever lived was wrong. But when it comes to the specific success of the New England Patriots, I'm betting against it for Mike Vrabel. When it comes to Vrabel developing the quarterback, which is by far the most important thing that could ever happen in that situation, I'm betting against it. In terms of Vrabel hiring the right offensive coach and the right offensive coaching staff, offensive line coach, for instance, to be able to foster the growth and development of a young quarterback, I'll bet against it. I went on Boston radio yesterday, and they asked me about the pros and cons of Vrabel. I said, you want the pros and cons? Pro, he's a lot like Belichick. Con, he's a lot like Belichick. And the biggest problem with Bill Belichick is outside of Charlie Weiss bringing up Tom Brady and just the right place, right time, right now. Bill made the right decision. But outside of that, at the end, Bill couldn't develop the quarterback. Bill couldn't get the offensive coaching staff right. Sounds kind of like Vrabel. So again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Tim Kelly will be the offensive coordinator there and Drake May will be Dan Marino. But I doubt it. Again, you got to bet one way or the other. I'm betting against it. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get to your phones on this. Plus, Ryan Cowden is following Vrabel to New England, and he was asked today about Elliott Wolf and personnel control and all the drama. Oh, it's back. And the return of Vrabelese. We'll hit that coming up. 615-737-1025 here on our program. Tomorrow is your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. If you correctly guess a Preds player that scores a goal in the Preds game tomorrow night, you will win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Predators home game. Participate with Robbie and Rexro tomorrow morning at 8:45.
Mike, congratulations.
Thank you.
You lived through the collaborative process, especially at the end in Tennessee. I'm curious how you view that, and do you have roster control over the draft here with the Patriots?
Well, I think the most important thing is that there's a shared organizational vision for what we want to do and how we want to work and how we want to acquire players. There's numerous ways to acquire players through free agency, trade, draft, post-draft process, after training camp. So again, I'm just excited to get to sit down with Elliott and his staff. I've met more with Elliott over the weekend than I have had conversations with him. But I need to sit down with his staff and figure out where we're at, what we need to do. And I'm confident that those types of decisions are all going to, sort themselves out. We don't want to always be on the same page. Like, that's not the environment that we want to create, but we want to have a shared vision. And there's also different ways to get there. And I'm embracing that everybody's going to have a different personality. I don't want my staff to be like me. I don't want all our players to be similar. We're going to have diverse ideas, and that's critical. And to be able to have those types of conversations is something that I'm looking forward to.
With the corporate bullcrappery that Mike Vrabel just gave out right there in his press conference, I'm surprised he and Chad Brinker didn't get along better. I mean, Mike, are you going to have full personnel control with Elliott Wolf? What do we make of that? He also was asked, by the way, about Ryan Cowden, who's going to be joining the front office in New England. And I'm not a Ryan Cowden poo-pooer. I wouldn't have made him the GM, but I'm not a Ryan Cowden poo-pooer. But he was asked about Ryan Cowden. He was asked about roster control. And instead of, will you have roster control? He said, we're going to have a shared vision. We'll disagree some. But I've spent all this time with Elliott, and I've talked to Elliott, and and I died laughing today. A buddy of mine does the afternoon show in Boston. They're probably on the air right now. And he texted me, and he said, it kind of sounds like Elliott calls him Elliott Worm. But he said, it may sound like Elliott Worm isn't going anywhere, unfortunately. I said, that's all talk. I said, you don't have to worry about that. Vrabel is absolutely my way or the highwaying Elliott Wolf. And he may even my way or the highway him, even if Elliott Wolf plays ball. Because Ryan Cowden is going to be Mike Vrabel's caddy. Like, that's what he's hiring. Stretch to come back in. Here's what's amazing. Vrabel doesn't like Belichick. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but when they played the first time in 2018 and the Patriots ran a reverse pass for Brady and Brady dropped it, on the next drive, the Titans ran the reverse pass for Mariota. It was a giant pull your pants down and stick it in Bill's face. Because as the story goes, Vrabel went to Bill and said when he was a player, hey, I'd like to retire a Patriot. And 2 weeks later, Vrabel was traded. So Vrabel didn't like Bill. That's why Vrabel got his rocks off on using that clock loophole against Belichick in the playoffs and loved every second of it. And so, yet at the same time, Vrabel is Bill Belichick with a personality. That's what he is. What's the old saying in psychology? The more you resist, the more it persists. He hates Bill. And yet that's exactly who he's going to be. That's exactly who he is. Can't hire offensive coaches. When he lucks into the right quarterback situation, which Tannehill was lucking into the right situation. When he lucks into the right quarterback situation, they can be very, very smart. Very good. Vrabel is smart. Like, I am not telling you Vrabel's a dope. He's not. Vrabel's a smart guy. But they're arrogant, and they think they invented football. And they do not work well with others. And here's what is, again, amazing. There's a guy by the name of Bobby Greer. You probably don't know who Bobby Greer is unless you're 55 years old and paid attention to football 20 years ago. But Bobby Greer's son is Chris Greer, the general manager of the Miami Dolphins. And the other Greer, Ian, I think it's Mike Greer, the GM of the San Jose Sharks.
Yes.
Okay. Those are Bobby Greer's kids. Bobby Greer was the general manager of the New England Patriots. And if you remember, there was an infamous press conference years ago where Bill Parcells got mad and he said, they want you to cook the dinner, but they won't let you buy the groceries. That was directed at Bobby Greer. Kraft sided with Bobby Greer. Parcells went to the Jets. Kraft hired Pete Carroll. Kraft fired Pete Carroll. Kraft hired Bill Belichick. It was Bill Belichick and Bobby Greer. Lloyd Carr, the coach of Michigan, said the only general manager that came and asked him about Tom Brady was Bobby Greer. And after a couple of years, guess what? Bill ran him off. So, Parcells and Bobby Greer couldn't get along. And Parcells, he's arrogant. My team, my quarterback, my coach, my system, my groceries. Bill gets in there, plays nice, runs a guy off. That's what Vrabel's going to do. Again, we're going to have a shared vision. That's Vrabelese. I had to tell my friends all about Vrabelese, saying, no. In fact, that's the opposite. You think Elliott Wolf's staying. I'm telling you right now, Elliott Wolf better get on the Vrabel train or he's gone, because Vrabel's going to run his ass out of there as soon as he can. When Mike Vrabel says we're going to have a shared vision, what Mike Vrabel is saying is we're going to share my vision. And if you don't, Ryan Cowden will. It's amazing. And I thought, I was stupid enough to think maybe Vrabel learned something from his first go-round. And yet, here's Vrabel again. Shared vision. Mike Vrabel doesn't share. What are we talking about here? Phone lines are by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam in Portland has been waiting patiently and is going to kick us off today on the program. Adam, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
I thought it was really weird. I mean, it's perfect. It's exactly where he wants to be. He's in New England because it's not like that everywhere. Remember that? It's not like it everywhere, guys. You got something special here. He loves it. Like, that's why he's there. But the thing about Mike Vrabel is I've never seen him win unless he's had the greatest running back in history on his team. He sucked as a D coordinator with the Texans. He sucked in his role with Cleveland. I've never seen him unless he's got the most electric running back on the planet, which, by the way, they had already won, a handful. They'd already had the momentum going even the season Derek got hurt. I'm saying is Mike has never proven anything without Derrick Henry. So it is what it is, man. I was happy whenever he left because I kind of see through it. I think it's brick wallpaper, man. I don't think he'll be good there either.
So I guess I'm a little different than Adam in this, because Adam's sitting here telling us he's no good without Derrick Henry. Well, Mike Vrabel's never coached a game without Derrick Henry on his team. So there's no way to know if Vrabel will be good with or without Derrick Henry. Here's my thing with Vrabel. It's the coaching staff. I think Vrabel is a good motivator. I think Vrabel is a smart guy. I think Vrabel's a good coach. But I don't think Mike Vrabel has the knowledge base, because he hasn't been coaching long enough, to be able to hire a good coaching staff. And I knew it when they made the changes after the 2022 season. They fired Todd Downing, thank God. They fired Keith Carter, the offensive line coach, and they promoted from within in both positions. And I said, oh my God, this guy, he doesn't know. Vrabel doesn't know coaches. He doesn't know how to build a coaching staff. That's not Vrabel's fault. That's the fault that Vrabel had coached in the NFL for 4 years before he got hired to be head coach, and he'd only coached in one place, Houston. One thing that would be very alarming to me. So the Giants are letting Ryan Cowden out of his contract to go to New England for some unnamed title. It's not going to be general manager, but they're letting Ryan Cowden out. There was a report yesterday that Shane Bowen is staying with the Giants. Shane Bowen is happy being the D coordinator of the Giants. Now, I don't know if the Maras said, look, man, you're our D coordinator. We're not just going to let you go to New England to be the D coordinator. But I was sitting there thinking long and hard about who the hell is Mike Vrabel going to hire as his D coordinator if Shane Bowen's not available?
I don't know. He'll probably find somebody who's on the staff here.
Can't hire Dean Pease. That bridge has been burned.
Yeah, probably not.
Can't hire Pawpaw Dean. And in all fairness, Pawpaw Dean's probably a little too old here. I mean, if Bowen stays there, I'm trying to think. Who else was on? Terrell Williams? Could
be.
That be his defensive coordinator?
Yeah, somebody who's ready for a promotion, perhaps.
It was hilarious because when I did the interview yesterday in Boston, they were like, well, we've talked a lot about offensive coordinator and Vrabel hiring, and they were like, but he did hire Matt LaFleur and he did hire Arthur Smith. So is that a sign that I say he didn't hire? Oh God, he hated Matt LaFleur. He hired Matt LaFleur because Matt LaFleur interviewed for the head coaching job, didn't get it. Amy liked Matt LaFleur, and John Robinson went to Vrabel and said, what do you think? And Vrabel said, sure. And Vrabel hated Matt LaFleur. That's why when they played each other, they tried to run it up in the fourth quarter instead of run it out because they hated each other. The report was Vrabel was going to demote Matt LaFleur if he didn't get that job. Vrabel only promoted Arthur Smith because Matt LaFleur wanted to take Arthur Smith to Green Bay. And that's because Vrabel is so petty. But this idea that Vrabel can find this coaching talent, like, no, Vrabel, he spotted these guys a mile away. It's just so fugazi. And if Bowen's not going to be his DC, I don't even know who's going to do that. I mean, who's going to be, if you were to say, Jared, what does Mike Vrabel have to do for you to think that Vrabel's going to have success in New England? The first thing I would say is, who's going to be the offensive coordinator? Who's going to be the offensive line coach? Special teams, Craig Aukerman's got that taken care of. Don't worry about it. But everything else? 615-737-1025. More your phone, 615-737-1025. Plus, 2 people, I believe, owe me an apology. Well, I think a lot of people owe me an apology, but 2 people in particular owe me an apology. And I don't think I'm getting it from either guy. We'll get to that next here on Stillman and Company. Tune into 94.9 The Fan tonight for Vandy women's basketball. The Commodores will take on LSU at 6 o'clock, pregame at 5:45. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app at 949thefan.com. Vandy women's basketball is presented by Athletes Unlimited Pro Basketball. Coming to Nashville's Municipal Auditorium February 5th through March 2nd. Go to auprobasketball.com for more details and to purchase tickets.
Mike, you made a comment during all that that's kind of getting parsed here, talking about
Who's parsing it, Gentry? Well, then ask the question, Jared.
Question: when you said that other organizations don't do things as well as the Patriots, and that because you've been there, were you referring to this organization?
They've won 6 Super Bowls. They won 6 Super Bowls in 20 years. That's what I was alluding to. You know what I mean? I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's just extremely, a lot of success. And, and I guess just probably having talked to, Bill and, Mr. Kraft and the coaches I know they're on staff. I guess that was just my way of, bringing them good luck on Sunday. No, I mean, just the amount of success that they had there, that was the whole message was just for myself and the former players and everything, just to not take things for granted. Just the because I got traded myself and then went to a team that went 6-10, and it was like, where you're just trying to find ways to win other than knowing that you're going to win when you show up. It was my whole intent of saying that they've had it pretty good there for 20 years, 6 Super Bowls and however many else they went to.
Mike Vrabel, it meant nothing, Jared. And that was the infamous think like a man, think like a dude, think like an athlete. Jared, you will never think like me. If you remember, he said, Jared, you'll never think like me. And yet, here we are, just minding our own business. Here we are. And less than 2 years later, Mike Vrabel is a New England Patriot. He is the head coach. And Ian, I don't know if you remember this, but on this program, I teased the segment saying, I've got a topic Mike Vrabel's going to hate. And then, Ian, we talked about, I said, am I reading too much into these New England comments? And Ian, you said you thought I was reading a little too much into the New England comments. And
Sounds about right.
I was like, I don't know. Like, I just, I know Vrabelese. And I know when I heard that, I was like, he's not talking about the Steelers. He's talking about you. Again, I know Vrabelese very, very well. That's okay. Maybe it's that. And then when Vrabel got so pissy the next day about it, I was like, oh no, I struck a nerve. And Joe Rexrode said at the time, said it was a giant nothing burger. So, Ian, I believe you were on the text chain this morning, yesterday morning, when I sent a text to Ian, Caroline, Robbie, and Joe. And I said, hey, Joe, you still think Mike Vrabel's New England comments were a nothing burger? I'll hang up and listen. And that prompted Joe Rexrode to go off this morning during the Rex rant.
Now, people went nuts about this. Still, he went nuts, of course. He goes nuts about everything. I said it was a nothing burger.
You did.
And I was wrong. And Gentry asked us from the Tennessean, he said, man, I think I'm taking Stilly's side on this one. Okay. I was absolutely wrong. I've written about this, The Athletic. Amy did not take kindly to this.
Yep.
Amy Adams Strong did not take kindly to this. And it was part of the story last year of Vrabel getting fired. And Vrabel should have in some way communicated to her, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, there needed to be better communication. He's not blameless, like you said. He could have done a better job. I thought it was another burger because I can't believe that she actually took offense to that. But she did. So fine. We can all agree. I was wrong in that part of it.
Yes.
People are still trying to tell me that those words that we just played is Mike Vrabel intentionally at that time taking a shot at the billionaire who paid his salary.
In the middle of the
Yes.
In the middle of the season, when he had a job, he did not want to lose the job. So,
Yes.
So first of all, let me ask you, Robbie, was Mike Vrabel at that moment, because Joe thinks I'm the only person who thinks this, was Mike Vrabel at that moment taking a shot at Amy Armstrong?
I don't think so.
It's freaking idiotic. You idiots.
So, I believe, given the circumstances, I believe I'm owed an apology. One by Michael Richard Vrabel, a.k.a. Dick. I think I am owed an apology by Richard Vrabel for the whole Jared, you'll never think like me. Well, now you're coaching there. Even though there were other jobs out there that have better situations, you're coaching there. And I think I'm owed an apology by Joe Rexrode, who will not do that. Joe Rexrode will not apologize. If anything was clear today, it's that Joe will not apologize. And we know Vrabel ain't apologizing because, he's Vrabel. You know how it is. But again, scoreboard says less than 2 years later, Vrabel's the coach of the New England Patriots. And I think that what happened was last year they wanted to hire Vrabel, but they had put it in Gerard Mayo's contract that he was going to be the coach, and they probably felt handcuffed like they didn't have a choice. But now they got their warm fuzzies for Vrabel. And it was hilarious how much yesterday Twitter and TV were playing the cuts of Vrabel talking about how great it is to be a Patriot. Unbelievable. Ryan in Nashville says the Patriots play here in Nashville next season. Let me say this, Brian Callahan, if you want to keep your job, do not lose that game. Because I'm going to tell you right now, that game, you think the Texan game is personal for Amy? If a Vrabel brings the Patriots in here and they kick the crap out of you, you're fired. Like, if it's week 2 and the Patriots come in here and win 38-10, you're out. And Johnny Joe takes over as interim coach. I mean, it won't matter who the interim coach is. She would make me the interim coach before letting you coach again if you get embarrassed by Mike Vrabel. One texter says they've been talking about my takes on Boston radio all day. Let me say this, man. Boston radio has played a big part of my life. I got my start in New Hampshire, and the Boston radio show that I like so much, that show was on the same channel that the Celtics games were on. And so I was like doing an hour of sports at night, covering New England teams, but it was really like in single A, double A, and Boston was the big leagues. And I remember after the Patriots lost to the Ravens in the AFC title game and listening to these callers call in saying it's time to move on from Belichick and Brady and thinking my team has Mike Munchak as the coach and Jake Locker as the quarterback. What's the matter with these people? That I really kind of got hooked on that. But now they're just as bad as you. One text says Vrabel is not a good coach. He's a motivational speaker without proper coordinators to scheme games. He has not been good. We will see. One texter says maybe Matt Patricia could be the defensive coordinator. They're going to bring Matt Patricia back for a third stint? I mean, that'd be pretty bad. I don't even know. Like, who would be Vrabel's D coordinator if it's not Shane Bowen in the Vrabel buddy system? There's Kerry Coombs. I don't even know what he's doing now. I think he might be at like Cincinnati or some Fakakta school like that. Let's see. There's Kerry Coombs, who's part of the Vrabel buddy crew. There's Terrell Williams we brought up. He's part of the Vrabel buddy crew. We shall see. 615-737-1025 to the Ran Carthon interview. All sizzle, zero. I mean, zero stake. A lot like his tenure as general manager. And I have one major takeaway that I got from the Ran Carthon interview today. From Ran Carthon's words. I got a lot of takeaways from the actual interview that was a slobber fest. But I got one big takeaway from something Ran said that I want to get to. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3. The Game. We are presented by Southern Bank of Tennessee, live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studio, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. Let's give something away while I'm in a good mood. Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you will see the Belmont Bruins men's basketball team tomorrow night as they take on Valparaiso at the Fisher Center. Tomorrow night, be caller 5 at 615-737-1025. Good luck there. So I want to get to the Ran Carthon interview that went on across the street this morning, and everybody knew it. I woke up this morning to a text message. Somebody said, Ran Carthon on 104.5 at 9 o'clock. And I thought, oh, that's good get. That's good get. Told my girlfriend, and again, we're kind of parenting together, but I've learned that a lot of parenting together is a lot of, okay, you got him. Okay, you got him. So I told her, I said, look, hey, at 9 o'clock, I'm going to be out of pocket because I got this Ran Carthon interview and I got to watch the whole thing, see what Ran Carthon's going to see. What she said to me, she goes, I've got to see the Ran Carthon interview too. So we sat and watched it as a family. Now, when these press conferences and interviews and things like that happen, I have usually 2 colored pens. If you look at the stream right now, I got my blue pen and I got my red pen. And I write down in the blue pen what's being said, and then I write down my takes with the red pen. Makes it easy to remember my reaction to something somebody says when they say it. And that was an hour of my life that I will never, ever be allowed to have back. When I am on my deathbed, 90 years from now, 60 years from now, whatever, I hope I'm not sitting there thinking, gosh, if I could just have that hour of my life that I wasted this morning at 9 o'clock listening to Ran Carthon talk about the Drake and Kendrick Lamar beef. I'll be very, very sad. But I did watch and listen to the whole thing. And I have one major takeaway from Ran Carthon's words. I got a lot of takeaways from the interview itself. But I have one major takeaway from Ran Carthon's words. For starters, Ran Carthon said that he truly believes in Brian Callahan, which I thought was pretty obvious that, hey, that's my guy right there, Brian Callahan. The other people, I'm not going to talk about them, but Brian Callahan. But my biggest takeaway was Ran Carthon still doesn't really know what the general manager does. And there were 2 separate instances where I heard something and I said, wait a minute, what? Number 1, he was asked indirectly in a roundabout way about the reports that he is lazy. And again, we can get into the minutia of what the report said and but to Cliff Notes it for everybody, Paul Koharski put out a story last week with 2 separate incidents, Ran sleeping on the plane, Ran not staying for the entire Kentucky Pro Day. The story might as well have been headlined, my sources say Ran Carthon was lazy. That should have been the headline because that's what it said. And Ran Carthon refuted that. But when he refuted that, he talked about criticism. And he was asked about being lazy. And he said he was not one to lend credence to someone who wasn't invited into his house. Basically saying, the people that are criticizing me, I don't know. I don't know Paul Koharski personally. He and I aren't friends. We're not this. It's not like I have a friendly relationship with Paul. So when somebody writes something like that, I just don't read it. Well, that sounds good, but you can't do that when you're general manager. When you're general manager, you can't say, oh, well, I don't know this person who's criticizing me publicly and setting a narrative that I'm lazy, so I'm just going to pretend that doesn't exist. When you're general manager, you cannot put your hands over your ears and go, la, 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 I didn't hear it, I don't care, I don't this. You can't do it. You're the general manager. And I think that's a criticism that I've heard from other people in the media, is they didn't ever feel like they talked to Ran. Corey Curtis talked about how he felt like he had made an effort to get to know Ran, and Ran didn't reciprocate it. But again, when you're the general manager and there's a fire that is a PR fire, a public relations fire involving your fans and what people are thinking and narratives, yeah, is some of that bullcrap? Sure. But it's your job to put it out. You're the GM. So when I hear Rand Carthon say things like, I'm not going to listen to things that people write when I don't personally know them and allow them in my house. Bro, you're the GM. You're famous. There are a lot of people that are going to have opinions about you, that are going to say things about you that you don't know. And most of the time, if it's Johnny in section 800, it doesn't matter. Got it. But when there is a report out there that people in your own building are calling you lazy, you probably need to put that out. Number 2, and I could not believe this. Rand Carthon was asked what is next for him. And Rand said this was supposed to be an off week. Rand was planning to take this week, if he was still the general manager of the Tennessee Titans, off. Like not work, like vacation. And I heard that and I said, what? You had the worst team in the NFL. The worst. The personnel on this roster is a mess. The coaching staff is a mess. You have the number 1 pick. There are all-star games. There are scouting evaluations. There are combines and pro days. And if you were the general manager, you would have taken this week off? What do you do? And again, I know that Floyd was old school. And my education and what a GM does and how the GM should act pretty much comes from Floyd, which again was old school. But Floyd used to brag about the fact that he didn't take a vacation day from the start of training camp until after the draft. I didn't take one day off all the time. And Rand is going to take a week off? An entire week? Well, Jared, you don't understand. It's vacation time. And no, it is not. Not for personnel people. Coaches. Again, in the traditional model where the personnel side runs personnel and the coaches run the coaching. Coaches take a little bit more time off. This time of the year, coaches go 9 to 5. Personnel people have to work harder. If you're Rand Carthon, let's say he had kept his job. If you're Rand Carthon, you would need to be watching as much tape as humanly possible on these draft prospects ahead of going to the All-Star games. Because once you get that East-West Shrine, once you get that Senior Bowl, the things that, again, the general manager is supposed to go to. This general manager didn't go to it last year, but you're supposed to go to it. You need to know who you're looking at when you go there. Floyd once told me a story. The Patriots played the Giants in the Super Bowl, the Mario Manningham game, where they lost. They flew back from Indianapolis on Monday. And Monday afternoon, Bill Belichick was setting a personnel meeting. But not Rand Carthon. Because again, I don't think Rand even knows what the general manager does. I heard Rand Carthon today asking about what he learned, and he said that a lot goes into the job. Like, no, duh, it's general manager. And he talked about how relationships matter. Well, if they mattered, wouldn't you have won some more games? Because you're the best relationship guy there ever was. So Rand Carthon goes in and addresses the reports that he's lazy by talking about how, well, the people that wrote that, they don't know me personally. They don't know you personally. A lot of people report on foot. Again, when it comes to these insiders, the Adam Schefters and the Ian Rappaports and the Tom Pelisseros and the Mike Garofolos and all the reports that come out and everybody, not everybody's going to know you personally. And he just brushes it off like, oh, yeah, no, I don't give credence to that because I wouldn't invite that person to my home. Well, it's setting a narrative in an entire city that everybody thinks you're lazy. And then you told everybody you were going to take a week off. A week off. Again, I told this story last week when I went to the Titans facility and interviewed Brian Callahan. And I didn't tell this because the Titans let me into the facility for that. So I wasn't going to tell this because, again, it wasn't like, hey, we want Jared to come in here so Jared can throw us under the bus. And again, the point of me being there was to meet Brian Callahan and sit down with Brian Callahan, which I did. But I got there at 6:40 for a 7 a.m. interview. And while we were doing the interview, Rand Carthon was walking into the building. And he was clearly clocking in for the day. And all I thought as I was talking to Brian Callahan and I see Rand walking in was the general manager of the Titans just showed up for work at 7:15. Again, if Floyd Reese heard that, he wouldn't have been able to believe it because he got to work at 4 a.m. If Floyd Reese heard that the general manager didn't go to the Senior Bowl, he would not have been able to control himself. And now we got a general manager talking about wanting to take a week off. We got a general manager talking about, I don't care that the narrative's out there that I'm lazy. I don't know that guy, so it doesn't count. Maybe you should have, in 2 years that you were a general manager, maybe you should have taken the time to get to know these people. Maybe that's kind of important. So again, it was a very softball-y interview, and there was very little information in there. And I think a lot of people felt duped listening to that interview. But my biggest thing was, again, I don't think he even knows how to be a general manager. He did it for 2 years, kind of, I guess. And he was going to take a week off. Unbelievable. 615-737-1025. Now to the interview itself. I don't like being critical, but I can't hold athletes, coaches, administrators, general managers, owners to a certain standard and then not hold people in the media to the same standard. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game.
I understand that there are situations when you are interviewing a subject and that subject is not able to answer questions about specific topics. But you still have to ask the questions, even if the response is no comment. I appreciate the question. However, I am not allowed to answer this question, so on and so forth. From what I heard of this interview across the street, there were few attempts to ask such questions. Now, I don't know if there was an agreement beforehand with Rand Carthon, who said, I will come on your station, but you will not ask me about X, Y, and Z. If it were me, if those were the conditions, I would not have done the interview. There were questions about what he was listening to right now. I say this as respectfully as I can. We don't care. We don't care what what's on Rand Carthon's playlist. We don't. So,
and I think that would have been something that would have been, for example, a great thing to have in a weekly visit that could have been part of how you get to know somebody, how you connect with the audience. But your point is well taken. For this particular interview, that probably wasn't a pertinent thing that the listeners wanted to hear.
Okay, that was Willie and Adam today talking about the Rand Carthon interview. And I don't enjoy doing this, but I was thinking about this today. I was thinking, am I going to call out this interview or am I not going to call out this interview? And talk about just how truly terrible it was. And I'm like, if I don't call out how terrible this interview was, I probably save myself ruffling some feathers. Which, look, I know I ruffle a lot of feathers, but I don't know, the least amount of feathers I can ruffle, probably the better. So if I don't call it out, I don't have to deal with the headache of, Jared, why would you say this? And I'm so upset and etc. But then I also thought, how can I get up here and talk about accountability and talk about how a coach needs to be accountable and a GM needs to be accountable and an owner needs to be accountable and the players need to be accountable, and how dare this person do that, and how dare, when the single thing that I know the most about, I'm not going to hold accountable. And I decided we got to talk about this Rand Carthon interview. So I have to say this. That was truly one of the single worst interviews in the history of this city that I have ever heard. And I'm putting it on the hosts. One more than the other in that interview. But that was not the standard of what A, was being advertised, and B, not just what the fans wanted to hear, but what I feel like people are entitled to hearing. We know the Titan side of the story, right? The Titans say Rand stunk. Gosh, we loved him. He's a great guy. He's great with relationships, but he stunk. We thought he wouldn't stink, but he stunk. And he's the problem because Brinker stays and Callahan stays and Burke Nihill stays and Amy stays, but Rand has to go. They thought he'd be good. They thought it would work out, and it didn't. Okay, what's your side of the story? And some people will say, but Jared, Rand Carthon can't talk about his side of the story because he probably signed an NDA, which stands for non-disclosure agreement. It is a contract that you sign in which you get money and you don't talk. That's his business, not mine. So again, if Rand Carthon was doing an interview, and the only reason why I think Rand Carthon would want to do an interview like this is to get his side of the story out. Well, if you're going to do this interview, you have to understand, hey, people want to know your side of the story, not what your music playlist is. Not one person cares about that. I've interviewed Barry Trotz probably 50 times over the last 2 years, and not one time have we talked about what music Barry Trotz listens to. In fact, I'm sure there's a lot of time. It's not fun. This year, having Barry Trotz on every Tuesday has not been fun with them stinking it up as bad as they've stunk it up. And I'm sure the Predators would like it if I didn't ask every single week about the coach and his job status. But that's the job. So if Rand Carthon signed an NDA and he can't talk about Chad Brinker, well, that's on him, not on the interviewer. As the interviewer, you have to ask. And when you don't ask, which they didn't do, it comes off looking like you can't differentiate the balance between being friends with somebody and doing your job. And I have talked a lot about this over the years, about this particular job, this industry. And I always tell people, I say, you've got two choices. You can either be friends with everybody and you can pander to coaches and players and you can say, Big Jeff, or you can tell the truth. If you pander, you'll be friends with people, but nobody will listen to your show. If you tell the truth, people will listen to your show. They will care about your opinion. They will care what you think, but you're not going to be friends with the coach. You're not going to be friends with the general manager. You're just not going to. You're not going to be friends with the players, and I'm okay with that. But I can't sit here in good conscience and say, hey, we asked the players to do their job, and we asked the GM to do his job, and we asked the coach to do his job, and they're friends with other people too. We don't ever sit there and say, boy, I'll tell you, it's a big game this week. The Titans are playing the Bengals, but I hope Brian Callahan will be able to actually do his job this week instead of be worried about what's going to happen to his friend Zach Taylor. But we don't ever do that because, again, we know what his job is. Well, when you're in this industry, this is the job. And when you have a polarizing subject on in the middle of an ongoing story, and you refuse to almost ask that subject anything pertaining to relevance, you're not doing your job. And again, how can I be the guy that calls out the coaches and the players but won't call out other fellow radio hosts when they do, in my opinion, a terrible job? I don't think that's fair. And so, again, there's a lot of things about that interview that really offends me and really bothers me. And I feel like really has to be addressed. The first thing is, it makes us as a city look bad. It makes us look like a podunk town where anytime someone walks in, it's how I feel about college media. The guy who writes for the Rivals site that covers South Carolina and lives in Columbia, South Carolina. And the second the coach walks in, Coach, good to see you here, Coach. I'm so glad that we could sit here and talk about recruiting. I'm so glad you're here, Coach. You're the best coach who ever lived. And then 5 minutes after the coach gets fired, starts leaking out stories about, oh, yeah, this coach was awful. He was this, he was that, he was this, he was that. That's not real journalism. That's not real broadcasting. So when you're in a major NFL city and you get the interview with the former general manager with all the narratives out there about him being lazy and the questions about whether or not he got stabbed in the back by a guy he hired, and you sit him down and you don't ask him a single meaningful question, that's embarrassing. And I also think people need to understand what the job is. People need to understand that's not okay. That's not the standard for how these type of interviews should be conducted. Where we're just going to ignore everything important. I mean, Rand got up there and he said, the reason I did this interview is I wanted to thank the fans. You could have told the Titans when they fired you, hey, in the press release, can you put a quote from me saying, and I just want to thank the fans who have been there with us, who have supported me this year, the last 2 years. I want to thank you, and I wish I could have done a better job. They would have put that in there. I know, because I've seen it before. So, again, there's a lot of questions that need answers, but you have to ask them. And again, to Adam Vingan's point, it is the job of the guy. If he's got an NDA If Rand Carthon says, hey, man, I'll do the interview, but I can't talk about Chad Brinker. I can't talk about Amy Adams Strunk. I can't talk about getting fired. I can't do any of that. Then I would say, then we don't need to do the interview. Because the last thing I would want is for people to think that I got a big interview on this show and then Jared Stillman copped out and asked about what kind of music they like to hear. And the idea, well, what did you expect, Jared? That's the problem. That's not the standard for how we should be conducting business in this city. They would never do that in New York. They would never bring somebody in there and then ask them what they thought about the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef. Do you want to be a real city? I'm from this city. I want this to be a real city. So again, I was so disappointed, not just about the wasted hour of my life, but the idea that that type of interview can be viewed as acceptable. Again, do you want to know why Oprah Winfrey is Oprah Winfrey? Why Barbara Walters is Barbara Walters? Again, I'm not asking for Rand to be to go over there and make it the Jerry Springer show. I'm asking it to be more like Oprah, where once again, when you go and sit on Oprah's couch, do you think Oprah's going to avoid the questions that everybody wants answers to? We have Meghan Markle and Prince Harry with us, but we're not going to ask them any questions about the royal family. Instead, we're going to ask, so, what kind of breakfast food do you like? Of course not. So, again, I have to take umbrage with it. You cannot tell everybody. We've got Rand Carthon. We're going to sit down with Rand Carthon and then not ask any questions about Chad Brinker. You can't do it. If Rand can't talk about it, that's Rand's job to say, look, I can't talk about that. To which I would say, then what are you here doing the interview? Jim Rome went off about a couple months ago. He had Quentin Williams on his show because Quentin Williams was pitching something. And so he asked Quentin Williams about Aaron Rodgers. And Quentin Williams said, I'm not here to talk about that today. I'm here to talk about whatever it was he was here to talk about. And Jim Rome kicked him off the show and said, that's not the deal. The deal is you get to pump your product and then you answer questions. You want to come on the air? This is what you got. These are the questions. You got to answer real questions. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And again, I'm not saying that they're bad radio hosts or anything. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that that's the kind of stuff that if we're going to hold coaches accountable and we're going to hold GMs accountable and we're going to hold players accountable, we got to hold ourselves accountable too. And today, they were playing movie clips and not asking about Chad Brinker, which again, I know what the Titan side of the story is. I want to know what Rand's side of the story is because I want to know who's probably telling the truth. There are two sides to every story. The Titans have given you their side. I want to know the other side. But if Rand's not interested in sharing that, then don't even pretend. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. We'll get to your phones on this, 615-737-1025. Plus, I cannot get over this whole Rand Carthon, like, isn't lazy narrative with then something that Rand said on time. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, it's 1025 The Game.
Ed Henry says, curious about my Rand article. In the past with an editor, would I have been allowed to publish it? And what goes into deciding to publish it or not? I knew all of that stuff well before. This is not stuff that I got after Rand was fired. This is stuff I knew and that was building during Rand's tenure. Now, I didn't publish it during Rand's tenure for two reasons, really. One, I didn't have it all the way. You know, people weren't as willing to say these things. And I have these things from at least 4 people, 5, 6 people. But I wasn't as comfortable publishing it while he was working for the team. I wasn't comfortable publishing it while he was working for the team. And people weren't as sources weren't as comfortable with me publishing it while he was with the team.
That was PK last week talking about, again, the Rand story in which Rand slept on the plane and that pissed people off, and Rand left the Kentucky Pro Day, and apparently that pissed some people off. And I mean, TD's explanation for Rand leaving the Kentucky Pro Day early was that the SEC network had moved the time and Rand had a family commitment, and it was can I just put out there, I am so tired of hearing about Rand Carthon's family. I do not care about Rand Carthon's family. And yet in every interview Rand Carthon does, he has to bring up, my wife texted me and my kids texted me and my wife and my kids and my son and my daughter and my wife and my kids and I don't care. And by the way, while we're here, I want to discuss something because I do think that this line is kind of getting blurred. When Rand talked, when he was asked, and again, they didn't ask a lot of on-topic questions, but they did ask a couple. And they asked about the narrative that he's lazy and the reports that he's lazy. And he talked about, well, I don't even know the people making those reports personally, so I can't add credence to that. I don't want to give any credence to that. Those people don't know me. I don't know them. They don't come to my house. They don't. I think we need to define what's personal and what's not. Saying you're lazy is not a personal attack. When you are the general manager of the Titans, that is a job assessment. Is he good enough to be the general manager? He's a little too lazy. When you're a player, is he good enough to be an impact player? He's a good player, but he's a little too lazy. Let's use George Pickens as an example. Is George Pickens a number one receiver, a franchise changer? He could be, but he's kind of crazy. Again, it's not personal that you're saying George Pickens is crazy. It's about his job. When you start talking about somebody's wife and somebody's kids and somebody's home life and that's personal. When you're talking about job ability, that's not personal. That's professional. And I think Rand, again, blurred the line a lot between what's personal and what's not. For instance, when Rand says to people, if you get personal with me, I'm going to get personal with you, I would have to ask, what was personal over his entire tenure? Again, I called Rand Carthon incompetent. I don't think that's personal. Again, I'm not saying Rand can't raise a family. I'm not saying Rand's a bad father. I don't know any of that. And again, I don't care. I don't care if Rand is father of the year, and I don't care if Rand's the worst father that ever lived. That does not affect me at all. There was a really prominent Kansas City sports host by the name of Kevin Keatsman, who about 5 or 6 years ago was talking about Andy Reid's ability to get through to Tyreek Hill. And he said Andy Reid has never had the ability to get through to Tyreek Hill. Just look at his son, who apparently died of a drug overdose. That's personal. Talking about the guy's ability to parent, that's personal. Talking about whether or not you do your job as the gentleman, that's not personal, buddy. That's the job. So when I keep hearing all of this stuff, I'm like, I don't think some of these people even know what personal means anymore. And it drives me crazy. And I also can't get over this fact that Rand Carthon is pushing against this narrative that's out there now of whether or not he's lazy. Now, where it comes from, I don't know. Derek said last week he thought it was coming from Chad Brinker, and I have heard that absolutely, positively did not come from Chad Brinker. So at this point, I don't even know what to believe anymore. But how could he sit there with a straight face and push back on the narrative that he's not lazy and then tell people, I mean, I was supposed to be off this week. I was supposed to be kicking my feet up, eating bonbons. I was supposed to be off. An off week? In January? Ahead of the All-Star games? Ahead of the very, very beginning of the scouting process? During the coaching cycle? The assistant coaching cycle search? My guess is, and again, I'm just, this is totally an assumption I'm making. My guess is Rand probably was like, yeah, I'll take that week off and reset. And they probably knew they were going to fire him. So they were like, yeah, okay, whatever. Who knows? Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHonda.com, 615-737-1025. Caleb in Gallatin says, I was curious as to why they had Rand on for a whole hour if they were just going to talk about non-sports topics on a sports show. His priority was to say thanks to the fans, but that could have taken one small segment. The fans want questions answered, and we wasted an hour of our lives hoping they would get to at least one ballsy question, and nobody did. Somebody said, check out Kayla Anderson's tweets. She said that they could not ask about Chad Brinker. Let me say this. If I am scheduling an interview with somebody, and very rarely do we have our outside of the show interviews, because like I don't think we don't need to bring a beat writer on from Philadelphia to talk about A.J. Brown reading a book on the bench. We saw it with our own eyes. We could talk about it ourselves. But when we do, when we have an interview, I don't do this. Hey, you can't ask this. I'm like, well, you can't be on this show. I mean, the one time I remember somebody saying, hey, Jared, please do not ask about this, and me okaying it, was when Tony Khan, his dad owns the Jags, and he's got that wrestling venture or whatever. Tony Khan came on the show, and I guess the AEW, they had some sort of TV negotiation or something, and they were like, his handlers were like, please do not ask about the status of the AEW negotiations. And because I don't give a rat's ass about the status of the AEW TV negotiations, and I want to talk about the Jags and Calvin Ridley, and I said, okay. But again, if they were to say, hey, Tony Khan wants to come on the show, but he doesn't want to talk about the Jags, then Tony Khan's not coming on the show. I mean, that's just how it is. So if for instance, which would never happen, and I'm not expecting it to, but if, for instance, Rand Carthon were to say, I've got stuff I got to get off my chest, Jared, I want to come on your show, I'd say, okay. We'd sit down and I'd say, did you feel like Chad Brinker stabbed you in the back? Question mark. And if he said, hey, I can't talk about Chad Brinker, I'd say, well, then what's the point of you being here? So I don't want to hear this, though. They couldn't ask about Chad Brinker. Would they go to jail if they did? Jordan says, Jared, good on you for the insight to bring up the Shrine and Senior Bowl being so soon. It definitely puts the vacation comments in a different light. And your added descriptions of why the interview wasn't good help change negative outcomes. Sad to say, but it might just be to avoid Rand Carthon at all costs because nothing right now is helping himself. Okay. I do have a thought about this. I do have a thought about the fact that Rand Carthon, again, did a well-hyped interview that was all sizzle and zero steak. And we'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game. Preds fans, do not miss Smashville Live this Wednesday night at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs at 6 o'clock. See your Predators players up close and personal. Get autographs and pictures. Preds player guests will be Jeremy Lazan and Cole Smith. And that's this Wednesday at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs. So I just have to say this about the Rand Carthon interview, that today, again, I woke up this morning around, 6:30, something like that. And it was like, Rand Carthon is going on 104.5 at 9 a.m. this morning. And I was like, damn. I was like, that's a good get. And that's audio I'm not going to be able to play. But, I got to listen to it, see what he says. And you know what? This city's big enough. People know that there are 2 sports stations that people listen to. So you got to follow it anyways and say, okay, Rand said this, Rand said. And then Rand said nothing. It was an hour. Rand said nothing. Other than he said he believes in Brian Callahan. And he said that Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are capable. Did not say who he would take with the number 1 pick. Like, seriously, that's covered by your NDA? Can't say who you would take number 1 overall? Come on now. But I will say this. It hit me that Rand Carthon's entire tenure as general manager of the Tennessee Titans was all talk and no substance. And people who desperately wanted Rand to succeed made excuse after excuse after excuse. Well, Jared, it's not Rand's fault they took a crappy guard in the first round with the 11th pick. That was Vrabel's fault. No, that was Rand and Vrabel. Collaboration. And it was all talk, and it was all buzzwords, and it was all get you excited. And then it never seemed to add up. And I go back to that first experience I had where I called the Titans with that Kevin Byard scoop, and I said, hey, I need Rand to give me a call back. And again, I can promise you that the Titans PR staff, which is a very, very, very good PR staff, that the Titans PR staff went to Rand and said, hey, Jared Stillman, the local show, he wants to talk to you. And he says it's serious. I can guarantee you that happened. And Rand was probably like, I don't need to do that. Even though, again, that's the job of the general manager. But that was the problem with Rand. A lack of substance. All talk. Love to sit down with Taylor Lewan and talk about the vibes in our building. We checked every box. But again, when it came to actual substance, they didn't have a right tackle. It's kind of the same. Jason from Mount Juliet says, I think the Rand interview was more of him testing the waters for a media career because that discussion sure made it sound like he was playing GM rather than being GM. Again, I don't even know what the point of Rand doing that was, in all seriousness. Like when I saw Rand was going in studio, I was like, oh boy. I didn't think Rand was going to burn it down, but I thought Rand was going to get his side of the story out there. He didn't do anything. Again, he talked about his music. One texter says the announcement of a Rand interview was all for clicks. It should be offensive to other media members. It's a disgrace of that station. And the one reason, well, I'm not going to leave it on that. But again, I think there's a claim now that they didn't hype up the interview. They hyped up the interview. And look, I know what it's like to hype up an interview. I remember the day the Predators signed Matt Duchene. And Brian Porth came to me and said, do you want Poyle or do you want Duchene? And David Poyle had a press conference at 2:15. And so I said, let's do Matt Duchene because that means that we'll have the first interview of Matt Duchene after he signs with the Predators. So we had Matt Duchene on at 4 o'clock. And I knew that was a big interview. And I knew a lot of people were going to be listening. And I knew it. And we hyped it up. And we made a big deal about it. And the reason we did that was because, hey, I'm going to ask some real questions around here. Now, it wasn't a controversial thing because he just signed and everybody's happy on those days. But if you know you got a big interview, you know people are going to listen to it, you can't hold back. That's the way I feel, with Barry Trotz on Tuesdays is sometimes there's really not a whole lot going on. Barry, how's the team? Then there are other days where there's a report out there that you're trading the goalie. Is it true? And you got to ask what people want to know, or else people will look at you as the boy who cried wolf. Let's go to John in Nashville, who's been holding patiently and is up next here on our program. John, thank you. Oh, Josh, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
What's up, Jared? I just want to know how you feel about that Charger take that you had on Friday. I guess the Chargers do have a better quarterback and a better coach, huh?
Let me say this about the Chargers, and really Justin Herbert in particular. Thank you for the call. And I don't want to spend too much time on this. By the way, Wild Card Weekend was awful.
Terrible.
Those games sucked.
Last night was okay.
Those games were. What's that?
Last night was okay.
That was a good one. Last night was a good one.
But yeah, in general, you're right. Yeah.
And those two teams, by the way, Tampa and Washington, very enjoyable to watch those two teams play. But I said this when Justin Herbert, and I am a huge Justin Herbert fan. But when he signed for all that money a couple years ago, I said, now it's up to him to win some of these games. We crap on Brandon Staley and we say, and Justin Herbert this and but when you sign for $55 million a year, whatever it is, and I feel the same way about Jordan Love now too. When you sign for this kind of money, now it's on you to win some of these games. You're the quarterback. And Herbert was awful. And yeah, Will Dissly dropped 2 passes, one that probably would have led to a Charger touchdown and another that led to a Texan pick 6. And that's not Herbert's fault, but I expected better out of Herbert. I expected much better on Saturday out of Herbert. I walked away from that thinking, you know what? Herbert might be one of these guys who absolutely lights it up and never, ever wins a single meaningful game in his career. And that will be
Phillip Rivers. What do you know? How about that?
Well, Phillip, I have more sympathy for him because he played in the AFC when Brady and Manning were in there, but I hear what you're saying. Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, pretty good too. But he's losing to C.J. Stroud. 615-737-1025. We've got an update on the Titans general manager search. And I got to say, what I'm seeing right now, I'm not sure I really like. And I'll explain why and how. And then there's something that's going on amongst like the local fringe media and the fans, which I want to put my foot down. I want to put a stop to right now. We'll do it next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, and we are presented by Southern Bank of Tennessee. So the Titans have interviewed 10 people, a 10, as Billy Bob in Varsity Blues would say, 10 people for the GM job, and you heard in Ian's update right there. And Ian, let me know if I have left anyone out. Ed Dodds of the Colts, Terrence Gray of the Bills, John Spytek of the Bucks, Ian Cunningham of the Bears, Mike Borgonzi of the Chiefs are all reportedly getting second interviews. I believe, did I leave anybody out?
Nope. Those are the 5 that have been reported today.
Okay, so 5 as of now. Maybe we'll add to it. I don't know. And there's one thing that I feel like I have to just put my foot down right now. I have to have a talk with the fans. I cannot get over people, and some of them are random Twitter people, and some of them are what I call kind of like the fringe Titans media. Like, they don't cover practice. They don't really, they're not known, but they do have some people that follow them or watch their podcasts or listen to them or something. And these random Twitter people are like, oh, I'd love Terrence Gray from Buffalo. My God, we got to have Terrence Gray. So if I was making a list, it would be Terrence Gray number 1, and it would be John Spytek number 2, and it would be Mike Borgonzi number. I mean, how can you not like Mike Borgonzi? And all I can think about with all of these guys who aren't former general managers with resumes, and I'm not saying that means that Mike Borgonzi isn't better than Reggie McKenzie, or that Ed Dodds isn't better than Thomas Dimitroff. But at least Thomas Dimitroff and Reggie McKenzie have a resumes and general manager jobs in which we can point to that and say, he drafted Khalil Mack. Ian, I don't know if you noticed that this week. It's Khalil Mack, not Khalil Mack.
No, I don't think I realized that.
Charles Davis and Ian Eagle, Khalil Mack.
Okay.
So Reggie McKenzie drafted Khalil Mack. And old buddy from the Falcons, Dimitroff, drafted Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. So you can say, but then the whole thing fell apart with Dan Quinn, and they did that. So that, there's at least a resume. All these other guys, we don't know any of these guys from a jar of Vicks. Oh, we've got to have Terrence Gray. What do you know about Terrence Gray? You don't know anything about Terrence Gray other than what his resume says. Well, he spent 2 years here, and then he spent 1 year there, and then he spent So? I mean, Keith Carter's got a resume like that. Hey, Keith Carter, he was here. It's like when you read somebody's bio. The Titans have a bio of Chad Brinker, and I think Chad Brinker's first or second year he was in Green Bay, they won the Super Bowl. And it says, Chad Brinker helped the Packers win the Super Bowl. Give me a break. I can understand pretending or thinking that this GM job has substance to it. Because I will say this, the Titans are very convincing in making you think that this is a real general manager job. Again, Chad Brinker has final say, but that's Chad Brinker has final say the way an owner would have final say even with a real GM. In Indianapolis, nobody questions whether or not Chris Ballard is the real general manager, but we all know Jim Irsay has final say. That's what they're saying Chad Brinker is. Chad Brinker has final say like the owner would, but again, the GM runs the team. And so I can understand pretending or thinking that this GM job has substance to it, which again is debatable. But the amount of people online that are pretending to know anything about these GM candidates who are front office staffers on other teams, it's wild to me. Again, what do you know about Mike Borgonzi? Like, what do you know about him? What can you say Mike Borgonzi did? And it reminds me a lot of when Rand got hired. And there was talk of, and this is what happens every time, but there was talk of, Rand helped build those teams in San Francisco. Did he really? Like, yeah, he was working there. But again, do you think the 49ers are like, oh God, what are we going to do without Rand Carthon? Adam Peters and Rand Carthon didn't have the same jobs, but they had basically the same resumes. Adam Peters got 8 new starters on that Commanders defense, and they're playing this weekend. Rand Carthon didn't get a single good player in 2 years. So, again, you can tell me about how much you love John Spytek, but what about John Spytek do you really love? And this reminds me of last year. Titan fans lit their panties on fire when they saw Brian Callahan do a press availability in Cincinnati where he said, well, you know, the team that throws the ball the best wins the game. And they're like, oh, yes, this is my coach. And I'm like, because he says that the team that throws the best wins the game and they've got Joe Burrow? Like, that's the guy? So, again, all I have to say is I'm totally fine with pretending that this general manager job or deciding for yourself that this general manager job is a real general manager job and that the guy who gets it is going to be able to either save or sink the Titans. I'm fine with having those conversations, though I think we need to put an asterisk when we have the conversation saying, well, if this general manager is actually the general manager and actually gets to be the general manager, which the Titans say he's going to get to be the general manager, but we don't know that for sure. I'm fine with doing that. But what I can't do is I can't pretend to know what these people do. What does Ed Dodds do in Indianapolis? What does Ian Cunningham do in Chicago? Because what a lot of this is going to become with a lot of fans is it's going to be, well, you know, Ian Cunningham, we don't want him. He's from the Bears, Jared. Well, yeah, but again, bad organizations have some smart people. You know, the Browns had an offensive coaching staff at one point that had Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniel, and Kyle Shanahan on it. So I think they'll be okay. But I couldn't tell you the first thing about any of these guys, and I'm not going to pretend to. I mean, I remember when John Robinson got when John Robinson got hired. And I knew that Floyd knew him. And so I said to Floyd, I called him. The Titans hired John Robinson at like 9 a.m., and I was on the air at like 9 a.m. or something like that. So I called Floyd, and I said, all right, just shoot me straight. This guy, he's a good general manager. He said he'll be good. I said, how do you know? He said, because he goes, when I was working in the front office in New England, he said, I had an office, and it had John Robinson, Bob Quinn, who was the general manager at the time of the Lions, Jason Light, who was the general manager at Tampa Bay and still is. And I feel like there was one other guy who is a general manager now or was a general manager now or whatever. So there's 4 guys in the room. And they're all general managers now, or they all were general managers at one point. And Floyd told me John Robinson was the best evaluator in the room. That was enough for me. But again, Floyd was there. And not only that, unlike random Johnny Twitter Titan 24, Floyd actually knew what makes somebody a good general manager or doesn't. So, again, I have no opinion on Ed Dodds, Terrence Gray, John Spytek, Ian Cunningham, or Mike Borgonzi. The same way I had no idea who or what Rand Carthon was before he got here. So let's stop pretending like we're some experts because a guy did a YouTube video on a team website 3 years ago and said, you know, I'll tell you, I think one thing that's really important here is that when you get to know these players, you have to decide with these players what makes somebody the best type of player they can be. Wow, we need him, Jared. Give me a break. I know nothing about these guys. Borgonzi, you know, if you want him so bad, you'll tell yourself he's the reason the Chiefs have won 2 Super Bowls in a row and going for their 3rd. But that doesn't make it true. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. Again, as of right now, the insiders are saying Ed Dodds, Terrence Gray, John Spytek, Ian Cunningham, and Mike Borgonzi are getting second interviews, which there is a good nugget in there. If this is the list and they don't add anybody more, there is one positive of this, and I think one really big negative. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman & Company, 615-737-1025, 1025, 106 for the game.
In my situation, I had final football say, we call it, right? Final 53 with Mike Smith in my first 7 years as a GM. When we hired Dan Quinn, it was a recruiting ploy. Dan necessarily didn't want final say. Dan and I had a great relationship along with Mike Smith when I was there. Dan had final 53. There were complications in it only because you needed to make sure that there weren't mixed messages, right? And in the end, you could have a coaching department talking about who they wanted and a personnel department And there's a lot of really good discussion there. Who is going to be the person that's going to step in and say, you're at loggerheads on that linebacker. You think this, you think that. Work it out, guys. Your owner is not going to sit in there and step in and say, I think you should take this linebacker or that. That's not her expertise.
Sure.
So who is she going to go to? This is something that no disrespect to how they're doing things there. If I could do it again, I'm a big believer in the general manager having final 53 early on. And I said this, and I would say this in time, like Mickey Loomis is in charge in New Orleans. But as Sean Payton ascended, there's a time when you can say, Sean, you take that. Your staff knows it. You can go ahead and take it. Doesn't mean that he's over top of Mickey Loomis, but I think you have to differentiate, and you have to have one in the end that's going to make the decision. Arthur Blank could not make that decision for us. So we had to have Dan Quinn take final 53. He and I luckily worked together, and we understood. Again, very, very, very important to have lucid communication between the two. It can get contentious if you have a double situation like that. And what you don't want ultimately, and I'm not saying at your place, in any organization, you don't want the backdoor element, because that is easy to happen all of a sudden.
Especially if you lose.
Especially if you lose. If that HC or that GM is going around the back to talk to the owner and say, look, I really want this linebacker. Well, let's make it happen. That becomes a problem.
Boy, I wonder if that's happened around here, Ian.
Quite possible, yeah.
I mean, the last thing you want is someone going backdoor to the owner. So that was Thomas Dimitroff on our show at the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Thomas is the former Falcons general manager, and he interviewed last week virtually for the Titans general manager position. And let me just say this. I am actively rooting for Thomas Dimitroff to get the GM job. Now, I said there was a good and there was a bad. Again, we've heard that as of right now, the second interview list is Ed Dodds, Terrence Gray, John Spytek, Ian Cunningham, and Mike Borgonzi. So it doesn't sound like Thomas, as of now, is getting a second interview, which would not surprise me. But again, that doesn't mean that I can't root. And I am rooting for Thomas Dimitroff to get that job. And I'm going to tell you why I am rooting. It's very simple. Thomas Dimitroff has experience. And unlike Reggie McKenzie, the other former general manager that they've interviewed for this job, Thomas has good experience. Let's look right now at the hierarchy of the Titans. Chad Brinker, president of football operations, no experience. Brian Callahan, head coach, no experience. Denard Wilson, defensive coordinator, as of now, no experience. Colt Anderson, special teams coordinator, again, as of now, no experience. So the hierarchy of the football part of the organization has a combined 0 in the experience column. If you want to say, well, they all have 1 year after last year, okay, fine. A combined 4 years amongst the 4 of them, and it's all bad. Thomas Dimitroff, 13 years experience as a general manager, 1 NFC title, 2 NFC championship game appearances, and 6 10-win seasons. And I think having Thomas Dimitroff as the general manager, a guy who has experience, will help the other guys that don't have any experience. I mean, I talked to somebody this week, and we were talking about Brian Callahan. And again, jury's out on Callahan. He did not have a good first year. And nobody, including the Titans, will argue that Callahan had a good first year. Callahan won't even argue that Callahan had a good first year. But one thing I kept saying was, I know that if there was an experienced general manager in there when Brian Callahan got hired, an experienced general manager could say, do you think it's a really good idea? You've never called plays before. You've never been a head coach before. Do you really think it's a good idea to have a defensive coordinator who's never been a defensive coordinator before? But Jared Denard Wilson is so wanted by these other teams, and I think he's a great coach. I got it. But he's never run a defense before. Or would you be better off doing what Sean McVay did when he got to LA and he hired Wade Phillips and he said, Wade, Here's your side of the ball. Again, an experienced general manager. And that cut we just played right there from Dimitroff, again, shows his experience, saying, yes, in Atlanta, I had final say with Mike Smith. Then I gave final say to Dan Quinn. I think the general manager should have final say. I think, and I'll tell you why. In this experience, this could happen. And in this place, they do this. And in that experience. I'm not saying that everybody has to have experience all the time. Because if you took a head coach and you said he has to have experience, you don't get Sean McVay. But at the same time, Chad Brinker, no previous experience in this role. Brian Callahan, no previous experience in this role. Denard Wilson, no previous experience in this role. Colt Anderson, again, he'll be fired soon enough, but no previous experience in this role. And nobody thinks that's a problem. And again, when it comes to being general manager, what the Titans want the general manager to be is they want him to be somebody that runs the personnel side and manages the coach, but doesn't have final say over the roster. So a guy that already has a general manager job is not going to take this job. A guy who's got options, like I would assume Borgonzi in Kansas City, he's probably not going to take this job because he's going to want to go somewhere where, again, he actually gets to decide whether or not they should fire the coach. But a guy like Thomas, who's out of the game, he just wants to get back in the game, I would assume. And so he'll take this job, answer to Brinker, probably be able to give Brinker the answers ahead of time so that he can say, hey, here's my plan. And Brinker looks at it and says, okay, and goes from there. But all the things you're asking, I want you to set up the scouting department. The difference between these guys that have never done it before is they have ideas about how to do it. Thomas has done it. And I think that's important. Again, I thought one of the biggest problems, one of the reasons you sucked so bad this year was because you had no experience. Rand, no experience. Brinker, no experience. Callahan, no experience. Wilson, no experience. Anderson, no experience. Now flip this over to the Commanders. Adam Peters, no experience. Dan Quinn, got experience. Again, I sat there and watched the starting lineups. You know, they do the Sunday Night Football where the Jared Stillman, Louisville. And for each person on the Commanders defense, because I actually did a lot of research on this last week. And as I was watching the Commanders, because I think that there's kind of this misnomer that you can't build your football team through free agency. And I don't think that's true. I think you can. You just have to spend appropriately and you have to get the right free agents. And I think the Commanders are an example of that. Because I'm watching the Commanders and their starting lineup, and it's Dorrance Armstrong, free agent signing. Dante Fowler Jr., free agent signing. Bobby Wagner, free agent signing. Jeremy Chin, free agent signing. Frankie Louvu, free agency signing. One of the corners is a rookie. There's 8 new guys, 8 new starters on defense. But again, Dan Quinn had experience when he took the job. He knew what he was looking for in coordinators. Cliff Kingsbury has experience. Those guys have experience. I think that matters. I think one thing that everybody overlooked, the reason the Titans are in the crap bunker they're in today is because John Robinson was good at his job, Mike Vrabel was good at his job, and Amy Adams Strunk owning the team and staying out of it was good at her job. But they all got arrogant and they all got resentful of one another to a certain extent. And what we forget about, because it wasn't celebrated at the time, and I tried my hardest to highlight this on a daily basis, but people did not want to hear it, was when this team got reborn. With John Robinson as the general manager, Mike Mularkey was the coach. And Mike Mularkey and his old pawpaws had about a gazillion years of experience. Mularkey had already been the head coach in Buffalo and Jacksonville. Terry Robisky had been all over the league. He had been head coach. Dick LeBeau was 85 years old. That group had a lot of experience, and they taught that young team how to win, how to be pros. Russ Grimm The offensive line coach was a Hall of Fame hog from back in the day. And overnight, they rebuilt that offensive line. Now, John Robinson took all the credit, but again, they had experience. So if the Titans were to pick from one of these guys on the list, Dodds, Gray, Spytek, Cunningham, Borgonzi, I couldn't tell you the first thing about any of these guys other than where they're from. I could tell you that Ian Cunningham is in the front office with the Bears. What he does, couldn't tell you. How much responsibility he has, couldn't tell you. How smart of a football guy, no idea. But I know he's never been a general manager before. And so for me, I am rooting for Dimitroff because he, A, has experience, and B, has good experience. And this group needs experience. Now, the one positive from what we've seen so far, and again, they may add to the second interview list, is that John Ed Sullivan and Reggie McKenzie, Brinker's Green Bay buddies, are not necessarily on the list, which as of right now is a good sign. Because I was afraid, and still am, that this is going to be the Brinker Bozo show. And I don't want that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And we are to your phones here on the program. And I am hearing something again. I have now heard kind of the company line from the Titans. And I don't know if I buy it. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 Game.
yesterday morning, we got the news, and I had caught wind of this on Sunday, that the Titans would keep Brian Callahan, but they were likely to move on from Rand Carthon, who was hired back in 2023, and that the likely replacement would be Chad Brinker, who, I mean, the name had come up in the lather, rinse, repeat of assistant general manager here and this guy, but it wasn't anybody that was on my radar screen as somebody who was going to be running a team. I don't know much, if anything, about
Me
Chad
neither.
Brinker,
Yeah.
but and he showed up 2 years ago as assistant GM. And if his goal was, I tweeted this yesterday, if his goal was when he walked through the door as assistant GM to take the whole damn team over within 2 years, bravo, you did it. Well done. You climbed that mountain. You climbed the hell out of that mountain, because he is now fully and firmly in charge. So Rand Carthon is out. Chad Brinker, who became the president of football operations last year, he was promoted from assistant GM to the president of football operations. He now has the authority that Carthon had. They've changed the GM job. They took all the good stuff about the job, the final say over all football operations, and gave them to Brinker. And now they're going to go hire a GM who is basically going to be a director of scouting. You're not the GM. You have the title, but the GM is Chad Brinker.
That was Mike Florio last week. And when the Titans announced their new management structure for a third year in a row, when the Titans announced their new management structure, people said, so Chad Brinker's the GM. And the Titans told everyone, no, 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 no. And here's what I can say on that. I don't know if I believe the Titans, but I do think that the Titans believe that this is a real GM position. Again, I don't know if I believe that this is a real GM position, but what they think is that this is a real GM position. We have some news. Tom Pelissero reporting. We had the list earlier, the second round: Ed Dodds, Terrence Gray, John Spytek, Ian Cunningham, and Mike Borgonzi. Tom Pelissero reporting. The Titans are also bringing in Packers Vice President of Player Personnel, John Eric Sullivan, for a second interview. I'm going to say this right now. If John Eric Sullivan gets that job, and we are going to have a deep discussion here about the duck theory, which we talk about on this show all the time. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, chances are it's probably a duck. And when you convince yourself that it's not a duck is usually when you get in trouble, because the dust settles on whatever it is and you find out it was a duck. And you knew it all along. And so I said, look, if one of the Brinker buddy crew doesn't get this job, one of Brinker's Packer buddies, if they don't get this job, then I will say, hey, at least they did a real search and Brinker's trying to hire a real GM and they're trying to build a real football team. If they hire Brinker's buddy from the Packers, the optics will look like, yeah, Brinker's hiring some guy from the Packers to work for him, and this is going to be the United States of Chad Brinker. He's the emperor, he's the president, he's the king. That's what it's going to be. And so when I saw this initial list an hour ago, Ed Dodds, Terrence Gray, John Spytek, Ian Cunningham, Mike Borgonzi, I couldn't tell you anything about these people other than where they're from, because I don't know anything about them. And nobody in the media knows anything about these guys. And I said, well, at least John Eric Sullivan's not on that list, because that would give me hope that this isn't going to be the United States of Chad Brinker. And here we go. John Eric Sullivan is on the list. So here's what it looks like. Again, talking about the duck theory. It looks like they took 10 candidates to interview. They interviewed a couple former general managers just so they could say they interviewed some former general managers. Dimitroff and Reggie McKenzie didn't get to the second round, at least as of now. They interviewed Catherine Hickman from the Browns, because I'm sure the league wanted Catherine Hickman from the Browns to get an interview. The league does have, Ian, dare I say, woke initiatives sometimes like that they, let's interview her. So I think there's probably that. And then everybody else gets a second interview. Those are the real candidates. At least that's what it feels like from where I sit. But if this ends up being John Eric Sullivan's job, the guy that 2 hours after Rand Carthon was fired, Kaharski had a story up And again, we know where we think Kaharski gets his tea from. If that guy ends up getting the job, then it will be hard for me not to believe that this was just the Brinker Bozo society all along. And that I'm not sure I like. Phone launch room by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Dylan Antioch is up next here. Has been waiting very patiently. Dylan, thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Oh my gosh, you just totally threw me off with that news. I remember that name, and I was like, PK said that. Oh my God. Okay, let's see. What was I going to say? Yeah, this interview looks a lot worse on the Titans than it does Rand. I mean,
You're talking about the Rand Carthon interview?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Rand went about 2 years with only talking when he had to. Only when he had to. Do you think he's just going to reach out of nowhere and say, yeah, I want to do an hour interview on your station? There's got to be some sort of like contractual obligation here. I don't know how that all went down, but it's just more dysfunction from the Titans. They make him look bad. They throw their own radio host under the bus. They make their own radio station look bad with this bogus
But what are
interview.
the Titans didn't do this? What are you talking about? The Titans didn't book
Well, how do you
Rand
know
on
that?
104.5.
No. Do you know? Was it Rand or the Titans' idea? That's what I want.
Rand doesn't work for the Titans anymore. The Titans don't book Rand's crap anymore.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Do you think there was like a contractual obligation to where if you were fired, you would have to do an interview? Because why do you think you would do an interview? Why do you think you would ever do an interview? He never talks.
I have no idea why Rand Carthon
hates
did that interview. I have no idea why Rand did the interview.
Well, that's
but
what I'm saying.
again, I can tell you that the Titans did not book Rand. Okay, we're going to fire you. And as part of us firing, here's a non-disclosure agreement saying whatever you do, do not talk about the Titans. You know, it's like Fight Club. The number one rule of Fight Club. Don't talk about
why.
But we also want to make you do an interview in which you won't say anything.
No. Do you think? But it could have been in his contract. Could it have not been in his contract?
That he has to do an interview the day he gets fired?
Yes. I mean, seriously.
No.
Hey, maybe I'm completely conspiracy theory here, but I don't think that was his idea. It's just
Dylan,
dysfunction.
You know I love you, right?
Yeah, buddy.
This is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard.
Okay. All right.
I mean, and I appreciate your
See
call.
you later, buddy.
I love you. I do. But that is one of the dumber things I've ever heard. So let me get this straight. This guy, Dylan, I love you. I do. You believe the Titans made 104.5, put Rand Carthon on the air, and then didn't allow Rand to say anything about anything that matters. Why would they do that? What would the Titans be getting out of that? The Titans want Rand Carthon to take a flight to witness protection and never come back. And they'll be okay with that. Like that's what they want. They don't want to hear any of that. They don't want to hear any of they don't want Rand talking. They don't even want Rand saying goodbye to the fans. They just want Rand to go away. Why would they book him? It makes no sense. That theory, and I've heard a lot of stuff that made no sense. One texter says Rand and Ramon are buddies. That's why. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know Ramon Foster really at all. You know, we've seen each other around, you know, a little dap up here, a little dap up there. But I got a lot of problems with Ramon Foster as a media personality. Because I think he puts his own agenda ahead of the job. You know, whether it's his relationship with Rand or his job with the NFLPA. And so he won't talk about the Aziz thing, which I think was kind of, you know, I think you owe it to your listeners. When you're involved in the story, you owe it to your listeners, to me. But this whole thing about, you know, the buddy system, you have two choices in this job. You can either be friends with people or you do your job. And sometimes I think there's too much being put on being friends than doing your job. Rand Carthon. The Titans put Rand Carthon on 104. Why would they do that? Dylan says, Dylan texted back in and says it's the Titans trying retroactive damage control. No, I can tell you that is not the issue. Did it make you feel better about the Titans, or did it just make you more mad at them? Talking about 104 for doing the interview. More of your phones, 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. It's Stillman & Company on 1025 The Game.
I understand that there are situations when you are interviewing a subject and that subject is not able to answer questions about specific topics. But you still have to ask the questions, even if the response is no comment. I appreciate the question. However, I am not allowed to answer this question, so on and so forth. From what I heard of this interview across the street, there were few attempts to ask such questions. Now, I don't know if there was an agreement beforehand with Rand Carthon, who said, I will come on your station, but you will not ask me about X, Y, and Z. If it were me, if those were the conditions, I would not have done the interview. There were questions about what he was listening to right now. I say this as respectfully as I can. We don't care. We don't care what what's on Rand Carthon's playlist. We don't. So,
and I think that would have been something that would have been, for example, a great thing to have in a weekly visit that could have been part of how you get to know somebody, how you connect with the audience. But your point is well taken. For this particular interview, that probably wasn't a pertinent thing that the listeners wanted to hear.
Okay, that was Vingan today on the Rand Carthon interview that asked almost zero meaningful questions. And again, Dylan and Antioch, God bless them. Dylan and Antioch called in and said that he thinks the Titans are the one that set that up. I mean, like, Dylan, I love you, but of all the things I've heard, that might be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And the text line is just on fire about that take and the Rand Carthon interview in general. So I say we go through some of those, Ian, unless you have a thought.
No thoughts.
Okay, let's go right through them. One texter into the text line says, was it in Rand's contract that he has to stand outside the stadium on game one so he can say goodbye to the fans? I laughed my ass off, by the way, in the Rand interview when Rand was like, the reason I'm doing that is because, I just wanted to thank the fans. Look, I understand that the newspaper does not sell the amount of physical copies that it used to sell. What used to happen back in the day is somebody get fired from a job, they'd take out an ad in the paper and they'd say, thank you, fans, for everything. But we all have social media nowadays, and that includes Rand. How hard is it to put out a post of you dapping up Brian Callahan on the sideline and saying, Titan fans, I want to thank you for your support over the last 2 years. We didn't win as many games as I hope we would have won, but I want to thank you for all your support and for allowing me to be a part of your lives over the last 2 years. I'll always love Nashville, and I'll always love you all for the support you gave me and my family. The end. I mean, the reality was Rand Carthon needed to be asked about Chad Brinker today, and he wasn't. And Kayla Anderson has said on her Twitter, and I like Kayla. I do. I've known Kayla for a long time. She said on her Twitter that they were not allowed to ask about Chad Brinker. If you're not allowed to ask about Chad Brinker, you don't do the interview. Because the last thing you want as a talk host with your credibility, the last thing you want is people to think, okay, they're going to really ask the questions I want to know. You sit down, you take time out of your day, and then it's, hey, Rand, let's play this movie cut for you. Ha, ha, ha. You don't want to do that. And so, again, that's just my opinion on it. I'm sure it'll make people mad, but how can we hold players and coaches and owners accountable if we're not going to hold ourselves in the media accountable? But the idea that that was in Rand's contract to do that interview, I'm sure the Titans this morning when they saw Rand was doing that interview thought, oh, what's this going to be? And then very, very quickly, I think they realized that it was going to be nothing. And then they probably moved on with their lives. By the way, am I the only one that noticed Rand wearing that T hat? The knockoff Titans hats he loves?
Yeah, he did. He's still repping the Tennessee, I guess.
Again, what does the T stand for?
Tennessee,
so does the
right?
T not?
Or
so
Titans.
He's wearing, again, the knockoff Titan hat.
I think it's a city. more of a city thing than like a, the P stands for Philly, the T stands for Tennessee. I don't think it's a Titans hat.
It felt like a
guess,
Titans. It
guess.
felt like a "this is my brand Titans" hat the entire time, and I figured that I was wondering like if Goodwill was going to get a humongous donation of those hats, like last Wednesday, and there was going to be like 1,000 T hats just show up to Goodwill, and I guess the answer is no. I guess maybe Rand's middle initial is T. Rand T. Carthon. Who knows? One texter into the text line says, there have been two of the dumbest things I have seen or heard. One was Vrabel calling the tight end to run a goal line run instead of Derrick Henry. And the second is the idea that the Titans made the GM do an interview after they fired him. In fact, most of the time, these people make you not do interviews. One texter into the text line says, Rand has an NDA. I know. That's up for Rand, though, to say, not for you. So if Rand has an NDA and he's not allowed to talk about Amy or he's not allowed to talk about Chad, number one, who wants to do the interview if Rand's not allowed to talk about the things you care about? Brian Callahan will be on our show tomorrow, and we're going to ask him about soup recipes. Do you care about that? Brian Callahan's going to be on our show tomorrow, and we're going to ask him about this idea that Chad Brinker's now his boss and whether or not it's true that Chad Brinker actually wanted to fire him and how the relationship has been since Rand got fired. Would you want to listen to that? Give me a break. One texter says, perhaps the Titans should look for their next GM via ZipRecruiter. I do hear that there's an important person in the Titans who was hired via LinkedIn. I don't know if that's true or not, but I did hear that. One texter says, Brinker will not hire Thomas Dimitroff because he is smarter than Brinker football-wise, and Brinker, with all the power now, will not give it up until he's fired. I think there's some truth to that. And I think that's why it's going to be the Brinker buddy crew. Again, the old saying is, if they cheat on you, or if they cheat with you, they'll cheat on you. And I think there's a pretty good chance that Brinker knows, like, hey, they chose me over Rand. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to bring somebody in here that they could choose over me. That's, again, what it looks like. Speaking of what it looks like, over the last couple of years, you have been told not to believe what it looks like. And a lot of you have believed that something is not what it appears. But now, coming up next, don't we know? Don't we know now? I'll explain. We'll get to it next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios, and we are presented by Southern Bank of Tennessee. So we got three big stories. We're following all of them. The Titans general manager search, and again, I say GM, but I put GM in quotations because, again, we don't know how serious of a GM job this is. Mike Vrabel today was officially named the next head coach of the New England Patriots. And Rand Carthon did the single biggest waste of time interview in the history of waste of time interviews. That was such a waste of time, they wouldn't put that on PBS. And we're following all of them. But I also think we might need to do a little reset here for a second, if we could. And I want to talk about the last 2 years into the last week. If you listen to this show often, you're familiar with the duck theory. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, chances are it's a duck. We bring it up all the time. On my first date with my now girlfriend, who is the mother of my 1-month-old, she works in the music industry. And she works with a very prominent label in town. And she was telling me about a story that doesn't look like or isn't what it seems. And on our first date, I said to her, let me tell you about something that we talk about on the radio. We call it the duck theory. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, chances are it's probably a duck. So this music story you're telling me about, you may be right. It may not be a duck. But to general common folk like me, it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. And for 2 years, we have been told that everything that appears to be one thing is really not that, and it's always another thing. Remember the relationship between Vrabel and Rand? When Rand got hired and he and Vrabel were locking arms and they were best buddies and they were high-fiving and Rand, go get us a returner that doesn't drop the ball. Ha, ha, ha. Remember all of that? Then all of a sudden on draft night, Rand talked about this night being the best night of their lives, and Vrabel immediately refuted him. And all of a sudden it was like, is there friction between those two? And we were told, no, Rand and Vrabel are best buddies. Then Ian Rappaport had a report in which he said Will Levis was going to start against the Atlanta Falcons in October of last year. And Vrabel came out and said, I never said Will was starting. And immediately my head went up. I said, oh my God. And I was reminded about Paul Kaharski accusing Rand Carthon of leaking to Ian Rappaport in Minnesota at training camp. And I'm like, oh my God, this sounds like something. And then Fitz came on our show that day and said the coaches were furious from what he heard at Rand Carthon. And they told us, no. Everything's good between Vrabel and Rand. They called TD into the facility and they sat down with TD and they said, we're best buddies. Everything's great. And then Vrabel got fired and Rand said, oh, it was hard on my family that Vrabel got fired. Well, Vrabel just got the head job in New England. He ain't bringing Rand Carthon into the front office. He's bringing Ryan Cowden. The story came out in The Athletic last week. Vrabel's biggest problem in Tennessee was that when John Robinson got fired, they gave the job to Rand Carthon. Vrabel, in The Athletic story last year, it was reported, didn't think that Rand Carthon was ready to be general manager. So the whole time it looked like they weren't really getting along. It looked like a duck. It quacked like a duck. But we were told it is not a duck. Turns out to be a duck. Last year, Vrabel went to Foxborough. He was inducted in the Patriots Hall of Fame. He got up at halftime, and he said to the Patriot fans that it was a special place, and it's not like this everywhere. And trust me, Vrabel said, I've been other places. I know. I heard that, and I thought, whoa now. Is he talking about Nashville? Is he talking about the Titans? Because in Vrabel's life, he's been at Ohio State, Pittsburgh, New England, Kansas City, Ohio State, Houston, and Tennessee. I highly doubt he's talking about the Steelers. one of the most respected organizations in the NFL. Highly doubt he's talking about Ohio State. Highly doubt he's talking about Kansas City. Could he be talking about Houston? I mean, I guess. But it sounded like a pot shot at the Titans. I asked Vrabel about it. Vrabel refuted it. Said I would never think like him. Said that I need to think like a man. Think like a dude. Think like an athlete. Remember that one? And now Mike Vrabel's the head coach of the New England Patriots. Joe Retro said, it's a big old nothing burger. And then had to report a story that Amy Adams Strunk got pissed about it. And now he's the coach of the Patriots. It looked like a duck. It quacked like a duck. And now he's quacking as the head coach of the Patriots. The Titans, when they reshuffled their management structure and hired Brian Callahan to be the coach, they had this very odd asterisk to the entire situation where they named Chad Brinker the president of football operations. Ran is promoted to executive vice president, but Chad is president. And they said, but Rand's in charge, Jared. And I said, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. What organization has vice president ahead of president? Oh, you don't understand, Jared. And then during the preseason, the Titans put Chad Brinker on the TV broadcast. I've never seen that before. I mean, I've seen the actual president of the team go on there to sell season tickets, but I've never seen. This is our president of football operations. Chad Brinker, congratulations. So what do you do? Well, my job is to service the head coach and service the GM. And so what is your actual job? And I said right then and there, I said, it sounds to me like they promoted Chad Brinker above Rand Carthon to be Rand Carthon's babysitter. And oh boy, was I was called every name in the book. How dare you do that? It's personal between you and Rand Carthon, isn't it? It's not personal. They put this bozo on TV. It had to be something. I've never seen president, vice president. Who usually has more power? But no, Jared. I'm telling you, it looked like this. It looked like that. No, you don't understand. It's not a duck. It ended up being a duck. Now they're trying to tell us Chad Brinker didn't stab Rand Carthon in the back. That Chad Brinker did all he could to save Rand Carthon and all that kind of stuff that's coming out. Paul was talking about it. Again, I operate within the duck theory. Because this is the time to refresh that over the last 2 years, everything that we've been told, that we were told was not true, ended up being the case every single time. For 2 years, we've been talking about, kind of looks like there's an issue between Rand and Vrabel. Oh, no, Jared. Kind of looks like Vrabel rather be with the New England Patriots. Oh, no, Jared. Kind of looks like the Titans lied to Diana Rossini. Oh, no, Jared. And every time, it ends up being the truth. We end up being able to look back on it and say, wow, that actually was reality. Mike Vrabel doesn't want to go to the Patriots, Jared. He just said that the fans should be thankful that they won 6 Super Bowls. Sure. Vrabel always wanted to go back to the Patriots. Once he knew he didn't like it here anymore, Amy wasn't going to give him power, he thought Rand was a dope, and he knew Bill was going to be out in New England, Vrabel always wanted to go back. Vrabel believed, and he probably still believes, that he's better than the Tennessee Titans. Rand Carthon didn't know how to run a football team. Talked a big game, but he didn't actually know. And in every single moment, it was oh, Jared, you're just stirring the pot. Oh, Jared, it's just you going after Rand. Oh, Jared, it's just. But here we are. Mike Vrabel is a Patriot. Rand Carthon did produce the worst team in the NFL. Jeffrey Simmons is acting like a crybaby on Twitter, and Chad Brinker is running the Titans. Because again, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, we're all just best off assuming that it's a duck. I was told that John Robinson didn't get fired in an emotional reaction by the owner to A.J. Brown's performance against the Eagles. I have a hard time believing it because it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, so I'm pretty sure it's a duck. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Speaking of Vrabel, I went on Boston radio yesterday, and we were talking about Vrabel in New England, and I listened to the press conference today, see if there were any pot shots at the Titans, because with Vrabel, sometimes he can't help himself. And I think I've come to one basic sentiment that is just wildly stupid. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game.
He had never started a game. He had been in the league 4 years, and he joined us, and he became a starter those next 4 years, and we were privileged to win 3 Super Bowls in that time. And his impact, because of his work ethic and his competitive drive and his leadership skills, made it very special those 4 years. And those personal characteristics also made him a very high-performing coach, which he had started to do 7 years ago after being a linebacker coach at Ohio State for a year. He became a new coach at the Tennessee Titans for 6 years and finished with a winning record. You know, I might remind everyone in this room in 2019, he beat us right here in the playoffs. It was Tommy's last game as a Patriot. And then he went on to Baltimore and beat the Ravens there, who were the #1 seed. And then in 2021, he finished with the best record in the AFC, 12-5, and it was the #1 team.
And then they lost to the Bengals in the division round of the playoffs. Boy, I'll tell you, Ian, old man Kraft doesn't sound very good now, does he?
I was kind of thinking that. Like, no, it doesn't sound great.
Old man Kraft, I mean, hey, it is not sounding great. But I do have a thought now that Mike Vrabel's gotten hired by the Patriots. I listened to the whole press conference to see if there would be any pot shots at the Titans, because as we've learned with Vrabel, sometimes he just can't help himself. Like, sometimes he just can't not take a pot shot at somebody. Vrabel did not really mention the Titans at all. He did thank Cleveland for having him there for that year. He did not thank the Titans, but he did thank Cleveland at one point in time. But as I listened to all the talk about Vrabel, and I went on Boston radio yesterday, and they were like, Jared Stillman, 102.5 The Game in Nashville. He and Vrabel have gotten into it over the years. Jared, we know Vrabel the player, but tell us about Vrabel the coach. I said Vrabel the coach is a lot like Belichick. He's arrogant. He's a great motivator. He's smart. Sometimes too smart for his own good. I don't know if he can hire an offensive coordinator. I don't know if he can develop a quarterback. And it's his way or the highway. And yet I listened to Robert Kraft talk about why they want Vrabel so bad. And tell you, Mike was a great player and all of that.
Sounds a little bit like your Irsay. Not good for Robert Kraft.
No. And I have to be honest. I don't think Mike Vrabel got hired to New England for any other reason than he played for the Patriots. He played for the Patriots. He won championships with the Patriots, and he has proven to be a good coach. And I don't think Mike Vrabel took the job for any other reason other than he played for the Patriots. Like, I think Vrabel would have taken the Ohio State job, but I think Vrabel looked at this job and was like, I know Robert Kraft, and I like Robert Kraft, and I played for the Patriots, and I want to be the one to lead the Patriots back. It's like it's his alma mater. I think Jacksonville would have been a better fit for Mike Vrabel, where they already have a veteran quarterback. I think Dallas, now we didn't know Dallas was going to come open, but I think Dallas would have been a better fit for Mike Vrabel, where Jerry can do all the press conferences and Vrabel can coach the team, again, with a veteran quarterback. It seems to me, again, that Robert Kraft's hiring Mike Vrabel to relive the glory days, and that Mike Vrabel took the job, again, to relive those glory days. And I think that's a terrible reason to take a job. It's almost like you're marrying somebody because they're hot. Does it matter that they're hot? Yeah. When you first ask them out, that's usually why. When you decide to spend your life and tie your finances and marry into kids and everything, you probably need a little bit more substance than they're hot. And when I look at the Patriots, I see a team that is a complete and total rebuild. like a complete and total rebuild, except for the quarterback, where, again, maybe they have their guy. It's so funny, the amount of people that are like, the Patriots are in great shape with Drake May because he won games with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill had been in the NFL for like 7 years when he got to the Titans. Mike Vrabel played no part in developing Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill was a veteran quarterback. Drake May is in his second year. He's 22 years old. But they've got their guy, Jared. They think. After year 2, we thought Mariota was the guy. I mean, this is crazy to sit there and say that you know Drake May's the guy. You don't know if Drake May's the guy. You hope Drake May's the guy. And you still have to develop Drake May. And so New England is in this kind of situation where they're putting the pieces back together from the end of the Bill Belichick era, the Bill Belichick I'm so smart tour, where after Tom Brady had won the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay, Bill had to prove, hey, I'm just as smart as Tom was good, so I'm going to show you, I'm going to draft a quarterback, and I'm going to hire my crony, Matt Patricia, to coach him on offense, and you'll see. And Bill ran the thing into the ground. And they're still picking the pieces up from that. And you expect Vrabel to do that? You know, Vrabel didn't do that when he got here. Vrabel inherited a team that had Taylor Lewan at left tackle. They had Ben Jones at center. They had Josh Klein at right guard. They had Jack Conklin at right tackle. They had Delaney Walker, who was the Pro Bowl MVP when they used to play the Pro Bowl. The Pro Bowl MVP at tight end. They had Derrick Henry at running back, fresh off a 155-yard performance at Kansas City in the playoffs. They had a quarterback in Mariota. Defense. They had Kevin Byard, who led the NFL in interceptions. This wasn't a bare cupboard. That team had won a playoff game. That's not what Vrabel's taking over in New England. But again, it's about the glory days. It's about the feelings. It's about the, boy, I tell you, Mike Vrabel, he did some great things in Tennessee. I told him, I said, look, I don't think Mike Vrabel can hire an offensive coaching staff. I'm scared to death for Drake May with Vrabel coming in as the coach. And they asked me in Boston, they said, well, hold on. He hired Matt LaFleur and he hired Arthur Smith. I said, he hired Matt LaFleur because the general manager interviewed him for the head coaching position. And they said, well, hey, how you feel about being OC here where you can call the plays, unlike the Rams where you never call the plays? He said, okay. Vrabel hated LaFleur. Vrabel wanted to demote LaFleur. Vrabel and LaFleur hate each other so much that in both instances, a Sunday night game in Green Bay and a Thursday night in Green Bay, each coach went and just hung it on the other coach when it was time to run out the clock. They ran up the score. And Arthur Smith only got the job to be the offensive coordinator, a guy he inherited because Matt LaFleur wanted to take him to Green Bay. But when I think of Vrabel trying to hire a coaching staff on offense, I think of Todd Downing. I think of retaining Todd Downing after 2021. I think of Tim Kelly. So again, I don't think Mike Vrabel got hired for any other reason other than the glory days. But, I mean, again, I guess that's what the people want. The glory days, their feels. Again, it's like hiring an alumni back to the school. I'll tell you, he was a great Longhorn, and he's going to hook them. 615-737-1025, and our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in. Let's go to Sean, who is up next on our program here on Vrabel and the Patriots. Sean, go ahead.
Good evening. So I am from Boston. I follow the Pats, and I don't think it was just the whole old, he's a Belichick guy. So from that aspect, I think that he's there for culture building because Gerard Mayo absolutely destroyed the culture, lost the team. Players didn't want to play for him. But on the flip side, if you're Vrabel, The Pats have a stable ownership. I'd rather work for Kraft than Jacksonville or Dallas. Drake May had an absolutely dreadful offensive line and no receivers. And
you think Vrabel's going to be the guy to fix those problems? You think Vrabel's going to fix the offensive line?
Yeah, I think they're going to.
Oh my! Based on what? Based on what? Based on Andre Dillard and Aaron Brewer?
I bet you that I'm telling you, they're going to take probably Campbell with the 4th pick or 7th pick if they trade down. They're going to use their second round.
You mean like the guard that Vrabel took with the 11th overall pick?
I hang that on Rand. I don't think that was a Vrabel pick.
Oh, okay. So again, here's what I love. I think they think the same thing. Thank you for your call. I think they think the same thing. I think they think Vrabel is going to fix this offensive line. The guy who had Keith Carter as his line coach. We were having a conversation and we were talking about Vrabel and we were talking about how they're going to do this and we're talking about Vrabel. And we said, you know what? He's going to build it with the Jets O-line coach. That's what he's going to do. The Jets offensive line coach is the answer to our prayers. How many of those people would say, oh, God, no? But again, that's what it is with Vrabel. Him and Jason Hodling and all those bozos. That's what Vrabel does.
Where's Ackerman? Bring Ackerman back.
Oh, he'll be there. He will be there. Make no mistake about it. Craig Ackerman will be on the Patriots coaching staff. And then you're going to tell me, oh, no, Vrabel, he'll fix the line. Yeah, like he fixed the line here. Andre Dillard, Aaron Brewer. Unbelievable. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We do have some more phones to get to. Plus, the Rand Carthon interview. If you missed the hour of Rand Carthon, I've got the Cliff Notes version. We'll do it next. Stillman & Company, 1025 The Game. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love Hiller. They are my guys. They take great care of my home, and they can do the exact same for you. Did you know that Hiller's been in business since 1990 and his family owned and operated? And did you know that Hiller has been taking care of Jared Stillman homes since I purchased my first home in 2018? That's right. Jimmy Hiller was recently named the most admired CEO because of the way he truly cares for his team and clients. And he takes care of the customer on every job, every time, and they stand behind their work. And I know this because, again, I've been using Hiller at my home for forever, it feels like. 100% satisfaction at happy you'll be, or the service is free. And again, I know that because I use Hiller. Learn more at happyhiller.com. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller. Call the Happy Face truck today.
I understand that there are situations when you are interviewing a subject and that subject is not able to answer questions about specific topics. But you still have to ask the questions, even if the response is no comment. I appreciate the question. However, I am not allowed to answer this question, so on and so forth. From what I heard of this interview across the street, there were few attempts to ask such questions. Now, I don't know if there was an agreement beforehand with Rand Carthon, who said, I will come on your station, but you will not ask me about X, Y, and Z. If it were me, if those were the conditions, I would not have done the interview. There were questions about what he was listening to right now. I say this as respectfully as I can. We don't care. We don't care what what's on Rand Carthon's playlist. We don't. So,
and I think that would have been something that would have been, for example, a great thing to have in a weekly visit that could have been part of how you get to know somebody, how you connect with the audience. But your point is well taken. For this particular interview, that probably wasn't a pertinent thing that the listeners wanted to hear.
Okay, that was earlier today on the Midday Show discussing the Rand Carthon interview across the street on 104.5 this morning. Again, promoted. I woke up this morning and it was Rand Carthon in studio. And I was like, ooh. I was like, that's a good get. And it's too bad that's not on our station, because if it was on our station, we could play the audio, but it's not. So, and then I sat there. I told my girlfriend this morning and said, look, whatever happens with our son at 9 o'clock, you've got it, because Rand Carthon's going in studio, and I've got to hear what Rand Carthon's going to say. And she, a Canadian who doesn't know anything about football. I mean, I love her, but I'm not sure she played fantasy football this year. We watched the Ravens versus the Chargers. She had Derrick Henry on her fantasy team. And when the Ravens were on defense, she asked where Derrick was. So, again, that's how into football she is. Although she's getting better. And she wanted to watch a Rand Carthon interview. And we watched the Rand Carthon interview. And I was like, I can't believe this. I wasn't alive during Geraldo Rivera's reveal of Al Capone's vault, but it kind of felt like that. So let me give you the cliff notes of the Rand Carthon interview. Number one, it was the biggest waste of an hour of my life. I mean, everybody was texting everybody talking about, oh my God, this interview. Are you listening to this? It's like, oh my God, I stopped listening. Or somebody said, I don't care what kind of music he listens to. I mean, everybody was texting everybody this morning, be like, are you listening to this? I mean, my God. So again, it was the biggest waste of an hour of my life. Number two, Rand wore his knockoff T hat even after being fired by the Titans. I got to say, either he doesn't own any other hats, or apparently that T doesn't stand for Titans, because he got fired last week, and here he was wearing the knockoff T hats he loves so much. Number three, Rand supports Brian Callahan, and he said that he truly believed in Callie and wishes him nothing but the best. Said he had a good relationship with him, and I wrote in my notes, clearly making sure that you know that he is on Brian Callahan's side. But he did not say that about the other people. Did not say that about Chad Brinker. Did not say anything about Brinker or Amy Adams Strunk. Rand made the excuse of 4 coordinators in 4 years for Will Levis and says that he thinks Will Levis will be fine. Let me say this about that excuse. You were part of firing Mike Vrabel and Tim Kelly and giving him a new coordinator. So when you sit there and say, hey, Levis isn't bad, the problem with Levis was 4 coordinators in 4 years. You were part of making sure that it was a 4th coordinator in the 4th year. Rand refuted a report that he's lazy. Again, the report was from Kaharski. And he said that he doesn't give any credence to it because the people that are reporting it, he wouldn't invite to his house, which is not how this works, by the way. Again, I don't think you'd invite Peter King to your house, but If Peter King reports something, chances are it's probably true. But Rand refuted the report that he's lazy and then said he was going to take a week off if he was still the general manager. He planned to take this week off. And there are a lot of you out there that are thinking, well, I mean, what's wrong with that, Jared? You have to take a vacation. I mean, sometimes you have to go out there and you have to relax and recharge the batteries. And in the NFL, that's what July is for. That is what July is for. Remember when Floyd was on the show and he'd take a whole month off every year? That's because that was his schedule when he was in the NFL. Not January, not a week before the college all-star games. So Rand Carthon's trying to push back on the narrative that he's lazy, and then he tells people, oh yeah, I was planning to take this week off. Wasn't planning to get the team better, even though I built you the worst team in the NFL. Unbelievable. And then finally, I feel like, and I say this with all due respect, Rand was not asked one single hard question. Rand was not asked one controversial question. I'll give Kayla credit because she tried. You know, she tried to ask some questions, and the other guy was protecting Rand, which was embarrassing in and of itself. But those are the cliff notes. Not one real question was asked. It was the biggest waste of an hour of my life. And again, when they did ask questions like the lazy question, it was not, so what's your reaction to the Kaharski report about you sleeping on the plane and about you not being at the pro day? And it wasn't that. It was, you know, some people are calling you lazy, and I know you've got a lot to deal with. And so what do you do? Just to ask the question, and he can answer it however he wants to answer. And I cannot get over the gonna take a week off. A week off in January. Again, I'm convinced after hearing that interview and covering this guy for 2 years that I'm not sure Rand even knows what a GM does. And he was a GM. And I'm not sure he even knows. I mean, I'm serious. 615-737-1025. One texter says, the Rand interview is like the Tyson-Paul fight. I did not watch the Tyson-Paul fight. I thought it was stupid. The idea of a 60-year-old Mike Tyson fighting was not, I thought. So maybe it was like that. I don't know. One texter says, Jared, I am done with you officially. Why? Because we listened to that interview and it was, again, a waste of an hour of our lives. I mean, I hate to say it, but unless you wonder what playlist Rand Carthon was listening to. One texter in the text line says, I think while today's topics covered holding the media accountable, I think you should call out media members like this for encouraging fans to blindly follow the franchise like they know what they're talking about. Again, my call outs to the media are when I don't think my call outs to the media are when I think that they're like lying to people. That's when I get upset. Or when I think that they're not doing their jobs. The same way that I would get on a coach, the same way I would get on a quarterback, the same way I would get on an owner. You know, again, you hype up that you got Rand Carthon coming in studio and you start off playing movie clips for him and not asking him about Brinker and not asking him about Amy and not asking him about getting fired and not asking him about the things that matter. Well, we're going to have problems because then people start to think that that's the expectation around here. And then I got Barry Trotz coming on the show tomorrow, and we're going to ask Barry about why the team sucks so bad. And Barry's going to sit there and say, wait a minute, aren't you going to ask me about my summer playlist? No, because nobody cares. And that bothers me. You know, I saw somebody else in the media has this list of these GM candidates. Here's the list of all the GM. Here's the top candidates. Here's the second tier, the third tier. Like, what the hell do you know about Ed Dodds from the Indianapolis Colts? What the hell do you know about Terrence Gray and John Spytek and Ian? And the answer is nothing. You don't know anything about them. But it's like, ooh, I like him. He's from the Buccaneers. I want to be like the Buccaneers. Let's get him. I saw a YouTube video. He seems smart. That's what that is. And I think that's crazy. I think that's just total crazy talk. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Jeffrey Simmons back at it again. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025 again.
Well, before y'all get started, we all know what happened yesterday. A lot of y'all been here since I've been here, so y'all know me. That's not who I am. Not who I want to be seen as. I talked to Buck. We have an understanding. I have an understanding where we're coming from. I have an understanding where he's coming from. He have a job. I have a job. At the end of the day, I take full accountability of my actions on the field. I mean, that'll never happen again with me. Like I said, I always talk about that switch, when to turn it on, when to turn it off. I was kind of still had it on coming off the field, of course, with the way practice went. But that, like I said, that's not me. It'll never happen again. And to all you guys, like I said, I apologize. And not because it's hit social media, but it's because who I am. That's not my character. And I think from here on out, like I said, from that point, like I said, I spoke on about it. I'm ready to move forward. Any football questions, I'm here to answer.
There you go. That was Jeffrey Simmons at training camp when he and Buck got into it. Again, that was one of my favorite all-time feuds when Simmons went up to Buck and said, you need to stop talking on social media. You need to talk to me. And Buck said, well, come on the show and we'll talk right now. And Simmons said, I don't want to talk to you. So today, I don't know if you guys saw the drama this morning with Jeffrey Simmons. Ian, did you see the drama this morning with Simmons?
Something about a tweet, liking a tweet of some sort.
Simmons apparently liked a tweet saying that the Patriots should trade for Jeffrey Simmons, which in 2025 is, oh my God, did you see what he liked? Now, supposedly, and I can't see this on Simmons' Twitter account since I'm blocked by Simmons, apparently Simmons said it was some sort of mistake that he liked the tweet. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm tired of Jeffrey Simmons' fake tough guy, fake good leader bullcrap. But he is the best player on this team. And if they're going to be any good anytime soon, he probably needs to be on it. So I'm going to tell you what needs to happen. Amy Adams Strunk needs to pick up the phone, and she needs to call Jeffrey Simmons. There is a lot of palace intrigue right now as far as the Titans are concerned, but there is one person that we all know ain't getting fired. Her. Simmons is the highest paid player on the team. Simmons is the guy that they say is their leader, and he is the best player on the team. Amy needs to pick up the phone, and Amy needs to get to the bottom of this. Not Chad, not Brian Callahan, no. Because Simmons may be on the phone with these guys thinking, you're calling me today, but you might be gone tomorrow. But if you're Amy Adams Strunk and you're trying to keep this team together, you need to call the highest paid player on the team and say, what was the deal with that? And you need to lay down the law. You need to have the conversation with Jeffrey Simmons. You do know who owns this team, right? And if you're going to represent this team, you need to be aware of what your Twitter is liking or not liking. Sorry. But again, Amy wants control over her franchise. This is how you get it, is by picking up the phone yourself and calling Jeffrey Simmons. Now, I don't think Amy would ever do that. But if I own the team and I saw Simmons liking that tweet, I'd have two separate yet equally important reactions. The first reaction would be like, okay, I'm setting the record straight with Simmons because I'm the one in charge here. Again, Brian Callahan could call Simmons, and Simmons could say, if I get off the phone and call Chad Brinker and say, I hate Brian Callahan, they might fire you tomorrow. So who has more power, me or you? Same with Brinker. You call me today, you're fired tomorrow, not Amy. And secondly, Amy needs to get to the bottom of this because I think that she's insulated. And so she doesn't hear all of the chatter. But I do think there's probably a part of this where she needs to figure out, hey, do your players have an issue with you? You need to get that addressed now. You need to address the situation. Not wait on it, not, well, let's see, not, oh, I don't know, you need to address it now. So I saw that today. Again, maybe it was just an inadvertent like. I remember when Bobby Petrino got caught liking porn, and it was just an inadvertent mistake. Wink, wink. But Amy needs to get to the bottom of this. Because of all the crap going on, the last thing she needs is Simmons to start acting moody. And if there's anything we know about Simmons, it's that Simmons is very, very, very moody. And at the same time, Simmons is the best player on the team. And you're not going to get better getting rid of Jeffrey Simmons. That's it for us. Stillman and company. Again, a wild show today. Vrabel to the Patriots. Ran with the most boring interview of all time. And the Titans GM search continuing. We will see everybody live from Bridgestone Arena tomorrow at 2 o'clock. The Commodore Hour is next. Stillman and company. 102.5 The Game.